Hello, and welcome to JFF's Youth Apprenticeship event, a vision for the future and a plan for today. My name is Andrea Messing-Matthey, and I am a director in JFF's Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. This event today is brought to you by JFF's Youth Apprenticeship Intermediary and Apprenticeship Expansion and Modernization Fund contracts that are funded by the Department of Labor. Through these projects and our connected work, we're building on both the capacity and the number of high-quality registered apprenticeship programs serving young people and providing high-impact technical services and financial assistance to communities around the country. We've asked colleagues and partners to come together to share some of their insights about youth apprenticeship, the challenges, the plans, the opportunities, and their vision for the future. We're not focusing on siloed initiatives, but rather leaning into the ways in which we can connect, support, and align our efforts to drive education and employment outcomes for young people. At JFF, I lead a body of work focused on driving change in and expanding access to apprenticeship opportunities for young people in school or transitioning into their post-secondary lives using a systems change approach through both the work that we do with the Department of Labor and as a national leader in the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, or PIA. We are working with communities around the country to build capacity, create and strengthen partnerships, and build programs that create a bridge that helps young people transition into the next phases of their life. We work closely with community-based organizations, employers, high schools, and community colleges, workforce development boards, and others. Despite high school shutdowns and employer shutdowns as a result of the COVID pandemic, our project has registered over 300 young people in its first 2.5 years in occupations that are both high demand and high need, with many more in the queue for this year. I'm excited to be part of this event and look forward to the work ahead. I'll transition now to my colleague, Miriam Sullivan.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. My name is Miriam Sullivan, and I'm a director as well in JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And I'll be your MC for today's event. So when you see my face, something will start or end. So that's part of my role for today. But at the center, I lead our systems change approach to apprenticeship expansion for youth and young adults 16 to 24 who do not have connections to school or work. We have a really great team at JFF and with some partners working on providing intensive and customized coaching and technical assistance to really build the capacity of youth serving organizations, workforce boards, employers, to really connect more than 500 opportunity youth, young people that are not connected to education or work, into high demand, high wage apprenticeship pathways. We're really thrilled to have you join us during this National Apprenticeship Week virtual event to discuss the promise of apprenticeship for both in-school youth and out-of-school youth, and really to learn how leaders from across the United States are implementing and expanding these programs in their schools, their regions, and states. We have a great agenda for you today that we've curated, where we have three main objectives. One, we really want to continue to build the momentum and generate excitement. Andrea and I are both very excited about today, but to generate excitement about youth apprenticeships. You'll hear about what's working well and where there's opportunity for us to grow. Through the discussions that we've planned out for today, we'll demonstrate the important role of partnerships into building and executing youth apprenticeship. And then finally, we'll show how youth apprenticeship can be a vehicle for improving diversity, equity, and inclusion outcomes. So we have a great session. I'm excited. Andrea's excited. We have an entire JFF team in the chat. So please feel free to send in your questions into the chat and someone will get you a response. But with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Maria Flynn, JFF's president and CEO, to provide some introductory remarks and for a conversation with JFF board member Andres Tapia. Welcome, Maria.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and thank you both for your leadership on this event and all the work that you're doing to advance youth apprenticeship around the country. It's really terrific. And I'm really pleased to be here. So thank you everyone on the line for being part of this conversation. And I hope that you come away from it with new ideas and kind of energized about the work ahead. And so, as Miriam mentioned, I've been asked to spend a few minutes giving some reflections on how kind of the field has evolved and changed as it relates to youth apprenticeship over the years. So it certainly is something that Jobs for the Future has been advocating for and active with for decades now, really dating back 30 years ago. It's hard to believe. And in those 30 years, like that's kind of the same time period that I've been part of the workforce development field. I spent the first half of my career at the U.S. Department of Labor and then the second half here at JFF. And across that time, while youth apprenticeship has kind of ebbed and flowed a bit, given different kind of political environments and kind of areas of concentration, it certainly has been a through line throughout that time. And I think what we should really be focused on today is that while the field has made great progress, we still have a lot more to do. And so I think thinking about how each of us in the roles that we play and the leadership that we're able to provide from our various roles across the country, how can we really make this an important kind of tipping point in the youth apprenticeship moment where we continue to pick up speed and momentum and scale across the country. So I want to start by sharing a quote with you, which I came across yesterday. So this is a quote, and I will ask if in the comments if people have a sense of where this quote is from. It's a moment of opportunity in the sense that a lot is ready to go, but these are really long-term issues. This excitement about youth apprenticeship isn't going to give birth to a full-blown youth apprenticeship system in the next 2 years. And so I came across that yesterday while preparing for this event. That was a quote from JFF's founding CEO, Hillary Pennington. And she gave that as part of remarks at an in-person youth apprenticeship event that JFF convened in March of 1993. And so I thought that that was really interesting because in some ways I think that exact same quote could be said today and probably still have the same type of meaning. But so what were the context of those remarks? So youth apprenticeship was an early priority for President Clinton. He had a proposal back then in the early 90s to actually invest $1.2 billion in creating and scaling youth apprenticeship programs. His proposal really took inspiration from the European style youth apprenticeship programs and was positioned as an approach to alternative traditional voc ed tracks that were found in comprehensive high schools back then. And while that specific effort didn't take root, there was different oppositions from it and a lot of politics happening around it at that time. JFF convened over a few years 20 states to help them build their youth apprenticeship efforts. And a number of those states, Arkansas, Georgia, Oregon, Wisconsin, and Maine, really made a great deal of progress. And I'm sure there are folks from those states on the line with us here today. And, since then, I think if we look from, kind of those early Clinton days until now, there's really been, pretty solid progress around the evolution of kind of the youth workforce and pathways field, kind of both youth apprenticeship and more broadly. And a few of those that I would call out would be the School to Work Opportunities Act. Again, it was a Clinton era initiative that was really looking to see how to promote high quality work-based learning experiences for all students. The revision of the WIA and now WIOA youth training programs to really take a more holistic and year-round approach to youth development. Back in the 90s when the Youth Build program was transferred from Housing and Urban Development to DOL in order to better connect Youth Build to the larger workforce development system, work that JFF and other organizations have been doing to modernize the Job Corps program and make stronger connections between Job Corps and local communities. The scaling of early college high schools as, kind of that model for integrated 11 through 14 pathways, and then some philanthropic funded initiatives that JFF has run around back on track models and the Pathways to Prosperity network that I'm sure many of you are part of. So lots of progress. And I think if you look across those, there are some really strong through lines that cut across. So one would be, a continued commitment to expand the availability and the scale of these high quality approaches. So how do we make these approaches more available to all young people? How do we create and promote innovative designs and models? So how do we create the space to foster and test out new approaches, right? Knowing that there's always ways to improve on the status quo. I think as part of that, like supporting and elevating the efforts of innovators, and you're going to be hearing from a number of innovators today on this agenda from different parts of the country. And I think part of what JFF really prides itself in is the ability to lift up those voices and create a platform for innovators to learn from each other. And then finally, like in addition to kind of looking at the innovations, also really driving strong reforms to the traditional education, training, and workforce system. So both transforming kind of the status quo traditional systems and continuing to move them forward while also testing kind of the new approaches and innovations. So to me, like those are some examples of how, kind of the youth workforce, the youth development field has kind of remained constant over 3 decades now. But here, as we convene now in November of 2021, I think there are also some really new, exciting, and important elements that we bring to the table. And I think first and foremost is the emphasis on equity and economic advancement for all, particularly looking at strategies that are effective for young people who are facing the biggest barriers to gainful employment, including Black, Latinx, Indigenous populations, immigrant youth, and LGBTQ youth as well. And Andres is going to help us dive into a conversation around DEI more specifically in just a moment. Another one is, as we're going to hear more about today, the emphasis on pre-apprenticeship and other really high quality on-ramp designs that help to open seamless pathways into registered apprenticeship for young people who have historically been locked out of those opportunities. So looking at that really strong pathways approach into registered apprenticeship. The other is, and this is a lot of the work that we're doing out of JFF Labs, is looking at how to catalyze and utilize technological innovations to increase access to and enhancing the quality of apprenticeship and career pathways programs. So really looking to see how technology can help innovate, expand access, expand retention efforts, and so on is really important. And JFF plays a really interesting role in kind of bridging the role of technology in the world of technology to the traditional systems. And then finally, I don't think, none of this can be done without partnerships, and partnerships with employers, obviously a critical piece of this, but really thinking broadly about what partnerships are needed at the state and the community level to make youth apprenticeships really work well for all students at scale. And then the final thing I would mention, I think, to me, where a lot of the future work is needed, one would be how to ensure that youth apprenticeship is part of a holistic approach. When I think back to those days in the early 90s when I was working at the Department of Labor, and back then I was working for the School to Work office, and I know I'm really dating myself because this was before PowerPoint slides, but we had overhead, like transparencies that we would use in presentations. And I remember we had one that was trying to show how youth apprenticeship, school to work, the evolution of JTPA to WIA, reforms in Perkins CTE fit together. And I remember they were just kind of these disconnected blocks on a page. And my concern is that 30 years later, too often there's still disconnected blocks and disconnected funding streams. And so how, particularly, I think states and communities both have a role to play here. How do we knit these together into comprehensive pathways for young people that are transparent and that are accessible to all? And as part of that, I think continuing to think through narrative change and how we change the narrative both for young people, for their families, for the adults who are supporting them, so that they can make really great informed decisions about their future. So to me, when we're kind of looking back 30 years from now as to where we've gone, I think those are some of the kind of next generation issues that I think we need to tackle in order to have youth apprenticeship scaled at the extent that we would all like it to be. So I just want to again thank all of you for the work that you're doing day to day. And thank you to the JFF team for pulling this together. And we are excited to work with all of you as you continue your work. But Andres has joined us, and thank you so much for being here. Andres joined the JFF Board of Directors, I guess about a year ago. He is the Senior Partner and Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Specialist at Korn Ferry. He's based in the Chicago area. Welcome.
Yeah, Maria, good to be here with you and everybody else.
Great. And so, as I mentioned, it really struck me last night as I was reading back through some of these articles from the early 90s. It struck me about the absence of a discussion of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so it was heartening to see how that has changed over the decades. But from your experience, particularly thinking about inclusion, why is it so important, and particularly as part of this discussion around youth apprenticeship?
Yeah, it's vital. I mean, the demographic changes of a more diverse nation are evident. And so we can, show that not only is there a lot more diversity and it's only going to get more diverse, but inclusion has to be part of the equation because you can have diversity without having inclusion. And what I mean by that is I like to say that diversity is a mix, inclusion is making the mix work. So, if we can have all kinds of diversities in our organizations around the table, but if we don't create environments of inclusion where we invite the different voices to be heard, where we're open to the challenges of the different voices, if we don't value and leverage them, then the diversity is suboptimized, and we have to create inclusive environments to really make the diversity work.
That's great. And I know I hear of a lot of examples where young people may successfully get through a training program and get into a job, but then don't stay at that job because they don't feel included, and leave to go look for other options. And so when you think particularly about young people and young talent who are looking to enter the workforce, like how do we rethink that with a inclusive lens? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, I think we have to talk about the contexts with young people coming into the workplace. As really, there will be the future leaders of our society, and one thing that current leaders have to take into account, and employers, is that even though there are good leaders here and there, and good organizations here and there, of course, like JFF and all the partnerships. If you look at the macro level, it's clear that our institutions and our leadership have failed us. I mean, the fact that we're facing an existential climate, crises. I mean, that's a cumulative effect of years of bad policies and neglect and things. The fact that we weren't ready for that global pandemic and we really struggled at managing it well. The fact that we have continued racial inequality in a variety of ways after 400 years from the beginning of slavery. The fact that we don't cover all our citizens with appropriate health care, the fact that we have too many, people that grew up in the United States that without legal status and et cetera, right? So young people look at the world that they have inherited from their elders, and they go, "There's something about the system that hasn't worked because there's a lot of things that are broken." So coming back to your question, employers have to be in an attitude of humility and an attitude of openness to the differentiated ways in which young people are entering it, because I like to say that to be young is to be experienced. Rather than saying, well, young people, you're going to learn from us. A lot of young people are saying, why would we want to learn from you? Because the outcomes you've come up with haven't been that great. And it's young people that have grown up in a world of greater, geopolitical instability and climate change and disparities and all that. So and the emergence of technology and how to best use it, and in a world of greater diversity and how to leverage it through relationships and thought leadership. So we have to, employers today have to shift their mindsets. As what is it that we need right now from these young people coming to the workforce, not in 10, 15 years once they kind of learn the ropes, but right now, because we are in a crisis mode in a variety of places, and a lot of the answers lie in our young people. And that's a whole paradigm shift that employers have to be in.
I'd agree. And I feel that that's not something that's going to flip back, right? That's a reality to me that's here to stay, right? And so I think, as you're saying, employers and organizations that work with young people and communities, like they need to really reinvent themselves, right, to be ready kind of for this new dynamic. And so when you think about young people then in the workforce, right, and within a work setting, how do you see them having the ability to really change the workplace for the better? Like, what are some ways that they can help to really kind of flip the paradigm and really kind of change some of those fundamental elements in workplace culture?
Well, young people are already doing that, right? We have generations, particularly Y and Z, who feel much more empowered to have their voices heard. They're leveraging the platforms through technology and social media. They're organizing themselves, or they're empowering themselves as individuals or as a collective group of people to make their needs known and their ideas heard. And so employers actually are competing, not against other employers for this talent. They're competing against, individuals choosing to say, I don't know if I want to be part of that system.
Yeah,
It's a gig economy. I have the ability to create, have a platform to create my own business, bring in my own voice without the filters. And a lot of young people are doing that. So how do young people who say, well, I have the choice to go off on my own, and that's great. But for those that really want to be part of a larger system, how can they enter it? And I think that courage and that boldness and that speaking their mind is key part of it.
yeah,
I think the idealism of a better world, planet, society, politics, education, health has to come forth, because if young people don't have idealism, forget it.
yeah,
But I would encourage young people to also, there's idealism on the one hand, there's realism on the other, and realism can be a killer, because realism comes with elders saying, well, you don't understand, or that's not practical. So but I think there's a somewhere in between, which I call pragmatism. So pragmatism is a way of not losing sight of the fuel and the fire that idealism gives you, that you don't lose sight of your North Star. But pragmatism is something that sort of takes into account that the world is not going to change overnight. The world's not going to change with the best rhetoric or the best perspective, because there's a lot of vested interests, whether we like it or not. And we got to work with that. There's different stakeholders. And I happen to be an elected official also, city council in Highland Park, a city of 30,000. And I may have plenty of really good idealistic ideas, progressive ideas, and it's my responsibility to not lose sight of that and push them forward. But there's 7 council members, and it's about a vote. And so if you don't get the votes, no matter what great idea you think you have, it doesn't get enacted. So there, you got to sort of learn to be pragmatic and say, I may not be able to get the whole loaf right now. I may not be able to get this tomorrow, but
yeah,
what are the priorities and what are the things that we need to get today and tomorrow? Really go after that. And then the other things, sort of be strategic about the pacing, and also be thoughtful of the ways in which people may be counter or resistant to your ideas, And rather than dismissing them or walking away, to say, it's my responsibility to influence them, to help them see what me and other people see, to bring them along. It takes a little longer. It might require some compromise. But I think finding that place in the workplace between idealism and realism and being pragmatic, but never losing sight of the fuel of idealism.
I like that because I feel like where we are as a nation, right? Like we have such a divide on so many issues, and that there's not enough of what you just said, like talking through kind of convincing folks, how to see the other side of an issue and coming to some agreement. So I like that.
And Maria, and that's another form of inclusion, right? I talked about including young people in their perspective, but young people need to include others, right? As much as there's plenty of reasons to be frustrated with the older generations, there's also wisdom and real people and real fears and real concerns and real experience. So, and when I engage with people who have different points of view than mine, if I'm open and inclusive to them, I always learn something I didn't realize. Like, wow, that's a good point. Or I didn't realize that would cause that kind of repercussions or pain on you that I would not have encountered, or a concern or a fear. So I think we have to be inclusive the other way as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you have a book, The 5 Disciplines of Inclusive Leadership, Unleashing the Power of Us All. And as you know, we use this at JFF as kind of the cornerstone of an executive team retreat we had in September. It was really terrific tool and a lot of really useful frameworks. But, in those 5 disciplines, you talk about how to use them to transform the world of work. So if you just want to give us some highlights, or how do you think about, those 5 disciplines and how to bring those to life?
Yeah, and there's a whole model. I won't walk you through it right now, but for those that are interested, the model's in the book and unpack it. But as I prepared for this, I thought about a couple things. That there's some competencies, which are the behaviors, and there's some traits, which are the sort of the enablers to the behaviors, right? They're the more inner stuff. And let me just illustrate a few things. Some of the key competencies of inclusive leadership, I would say, are valuing differences, which actually kind of makes intuitive sense. The ability to be situation adaptable, and I've given some examples of that just even in the conversation so far. And then courage. And I would highlight those three right now in our conversation about key competencies that are required to really address this issue of the new generation of work and the future of work with young people. And then I would say that the enabling traits, the inner things that we need, are greater curiosity, greater empathy, and greater humility. And so I cannot possibly value differences as a behavior if I'm not curious.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because a lot of people say, I'm colorblind, I'm gender blind, I see everybody the same, everybody's a human being. And there's something very noble and good about that, but it's actually naive because we are different. And my race, my ethnicity, my sexual orientation, my abilities, my thinking style, where I grew up, social economics, it makes a difference in how I view the world, how I approach work, what I bring to the table. And if I only focus on managing differences by focusing on what we have in common, I actually do something really negative inadvertently. I erase the very thing that makes people unique. I erase their differences. When I say I'm colorblind and gender blind, I'm erasing that thing that might be the most primary thing of how they view themselves, number one. And number two, by assuming similarity, not exploring it through curiosity, how could I possibly leverage the power of that diversity if I haven't been curious enough to find out what that diversity brings to the table?
Yeah.
So curiosity is a very powerful thing. And one of the biggest needs, especially post-pandemic, it's not even post-pandemic, but kind of hopefully the beginning of the end of the pandemic. But as we're coming out from the darkest part of the pandemic, right now we're battered, we're hurt, we're overwhelmed, we're recovering from all that. And right now in our corporate world and in a nonprofit world and government world, one of the biggest needs that we're hearing from people and for workers is the need for leaders to be empathetic. Empathy is one of the highest things that are going off the charts in terms of what employees are looking for from their organizations. Be empathetic to my unique situation, my pain, my need for flexibility, be empathetic to the fact that I have unique situations and ideas to bring to the table. So empathy is vital to being an inclusive leader, and that can only stem out of being curious. How can I possibly be empathetic toward people not like me if I haven't been curious to find out how their situation is different from mine? And only once I'm curious can I be empathetic about something that had never occurred to me, right? And the final thing I would say is we got to all approach this with humility. No one has the answers here. I mean, collectively, we have the answers, but no one person, no one leader, no young person by themselves has the answers because we're encountering dilemmas that we've never faced before, not only as organizations, but as society and civilization. So I would say that these are some of the elements that then collectively should then give us the ability to be more courageous because we're going to have to make some really hard, bold decisions to get our way through the many challenges that we face.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think those are the exact, kind of attributes that all the leaders, in this session should be kind of keeping in mind, not only as they're working directly with the young people who are entering these programs, but with their colleagues, with their partners in the community or at the state level, like how to approach this with curiosity and empathy and humility, I think is the perfect frame for that. So Andres, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's always wonderful to see you and hear your wisdom. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. And everybody have a great conference. This is really important information and content. So adelante, as we say in Spanish.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Miriam.
Andres, and thank you so much, Maria, for really kicking us off and for providing some insights around inclusive leadership and young people and how we can change the way we think about how young people enter and stay in the world of work. So I'm definitely excited for the day. This was just what we needed to get started. Andres said something really important around diversity is a mix and inclusion is making the mix work. So that's a quote that I'll keep in my hip pocket. But it is my pleasure to introduce the next session on meeting the moment. Please welcome Tamisha Bridges Mansfield, Vice President of Workforce Innovations at JFF, who will lead us through a conversation about, why youth apprenticeship, why now? Tamisha, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and I am really excited to be here with you all today. So, as Miriam said, I'm Tamisha Bridges Mansfield, and I am the Vice President for Workforce Innovation here at JFF. And in my role here, I lead our workforce development and job access work with an eye towards innovation, economic advancement, job quality, and equity. And I truly believe that registered apprenticeships are central to that work. And I'm really happy to participate in what is my first, I guess, official National Apprenticeship Week, although I recognize this has been a longstanding tradition and space of celebration. And really, really am happy to be here to recognize both the work and the vision of registered apprenticeships, and that this webinar is focused on youth and young people in that space. And so when I was asked to come and talk, and I really am thinking about, well, so what does youth apprenticeship mean, and what does that really look like for young people? And I really wanted and kind of took some time to like reflect on the impact that registered apprenticeships have on young people. And I thought really of the words of Miriam Wright Edelman, and she said that you can't be what you can't see. And so when we provide young people with a vision of kind of what they can do and what they can become, it can be really impactful in their trajectory going forward. And it's interesting because I'm often reminded as I think about the power of youth apprenticeship that I'm often reminded of my husband, who is a proud journeyman IBEW electrician, and how he entered the trades through a registered apprenticeship, but he did that later in his career. And he's often said to me that he wished that he knew back when he was a kid and back when he was in high school that he could make a good living doing good work that he would enjoy with his hands, because that wasn't the path that he was put on as a young person. But thankfully, it was one that he found, and he has found and flourished in later in his career. And so it really kind of reminds me, and I think it calls on all of us to really think about the importance of really exposing young people to a myriad of options that are available to them, to ensure that they are on an early path to professional fulfillment and economic advancement, and that registered apprenticeships need to be on that menu of possibility for them, and that it is imperative for those of us who work with, who are connected to, who love young people, to make sure that that path is clear for them, and that this is an option that they have. So I have been at JFF for about 7 months, and in my time here, I really enjoyed kind of learning more about our work in apprenticeship and kind of like the breadth of apprenticeship and the opportunities that exist beyond the skilled trades. And it's really been for me an opportunity to see kind of new ways that we are exploring opportunities in the space of apprenticeship. So whether that's with an eye towards innovation as we look at new industries and sectors, right, such as IT and tech and climate and resiliency. And those are two particular areas that have really captured the interest and passion of of young people. And it calls on us to ask, like, how do we introduce those areas of interest to young people and merge them with apprenticeships and really connect them with pathways and opportunities for them to continue to learn and work and grow across their lives. And I think also as I've thought about youth and apprenticeship in general in our work, I think it really calls on us, and Andres and Maria talked about this, to lean more into equity, and both in terms of ensuring that our pipelines to attracting diverse workers, whether it's Black workers, Latinx workers, women, or LGBTQI, or people with disabilities, that all the ways that we think about attracting people in is important, but it's also to make sure on the other side that we're creating welcoming and advancing workplaces for people of color and other folks to really thrive and live into the skills and potential that they have through their registered apprenticeship. So I'm really excited about what this opportunity is before us to continue growing and advancing the field of registered apprenticeship, particularly for young people. And I think the third thing that I want to kind of speak to and point to is that I think as we think about what a focus on young people means, I think it's important to be mindful, of course, to the demographic realities ahead of us, of making sure that we have young people who are on a path to economic um, self-sufficiency and advancement. But we also really need to harness both the curiosity and the talent of young people, and by having this explicit focus on apprenticeship, it really kind of forces the learn to work ecosystem that we are all a part of to be purposeful and mindful of the needs of young people as we're designing solutions and services. So, what youth apprenticeship requires us to do is to pull from a myriad of tools and resources, right? It forces us to pull from youth development. It forces us to pull from trauma-informed practices. It forces us to pull from workforce development and community development to create really impactful and relevant programs for young people that centers their identities and the myriad of them, as we're really figuring out, like, how do we connect young people to the best opportunities before them. So this was really just an opportunity for me to share a bit of like what some of my thinking is around what the importance of registered apprenticeship is for young people, why I think that it's important to focus on young people and what their unique needs and interests are, and really capture and harness that and help put them on a good path. And I'm really excited for the conversations ahead and to continue learning from the speakers that we have today with us, and to continue learning in the field. So I want to turn it over to Eric Sellers now, who is our director and founder of the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Hi, Eric, for a conversation that he's going to have with Brett Parton with the U.S. Department of Labor. So welcome to today's event, and I look forward to digging in and learning more.
Thank you very much, Tamisha. Appreciate your comments, appreciate your introduction, and thanks for this. I have my I Love Apprenticeship button on that I'm going to pass out liberally to everybody who doesn't have one. and you should develop your own out there. But thank you, Tamisha, and a special thanks to our CEO, Maria Flynn, for joining us on Andre's fabulous, down-to-earth, realistic comments that made me think. And I'm an old guy, so getting to make me think is harder and harder, but I really appreciate that. I'm joined today by Brent Parton, who I believe is on the line somewhere. And we're going to have a conversation. There he is. Hello, Brent Parton. And we're going to have a conversation today a little bit about, why youth apprenticeship and why now. And so, we've had sort of the introductory setting the stage sort of stuff, but I think we want to drop down or go down to a little bit more granular work in this space. A lot of you on the line, it's like preaching to the choir. You're with us. You get apprenticeship, you get youth apprenticeship, and are looking for other ideas and ways to improve that work. Some of you are kind of familiar with it, but not really. And some of you are here to learn a lot about it. So we're gonna try to aim to the middle here and make sure we can get everybody what they need. And we look forward to any questions you have in the chat as well. But we want to talk about why youth apprenticeship, why now, and really what's been going on the last few years and what we look at for the next couple of years. So again, I'm Eric Sells-Now. I oversee our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning that, when we launched it 4 years ago in DC, with 350 people in attendance, little did I know how deep we would end up in youth apprenticeship. And a lot of why we're in youth apprenticeship is because of some of the work of my good friend Brent Parton here, who's a senior policy advisor with the U.S. Department of Labor Employment Training Administration in DC. And full disclosure, Brent and I have worked together before in the past, both with the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, which he was a co-developer of, and as well as at DOL many years ago. So Brent, thank you. Welcome. I think I got your introduction right. Anything you need to add to it?
Nothing at all. Thanks, Eric.
I see the feds still have you working from home. So good for you.
Today's virtual day of National Apprenticeship Week. That's about to change tomorrow.
Okay, great. Well, hope you get out on the road. Oh, and I neglected to say, happy National Apprenticeship Week if I didn't say that, Brent. The card and flowers are in the mail. So look, we wanted to talk in the time we have left. Tamisha generously gave us about 2 or 3 extra minutes, which we appreciate. But I really think it's important for a lot of folks, and many of the folks on the call may have heard you say this before, so but some haven't. And that is, why youth apprenticeship? Why now? And what has been the history? What has gotten us to this point? I know you wrote about this a few years ago, but we have a lot of talk about youth apprenticeship now. DOL is starting to get involved in youth apprenticeship. There's some leading states out there that have done some work, but how did this all start with youth apprenticeship?
Sure. So I'll try to be brief on this point, but I think it starts by saying, why not? And that was kind of the question that we asked with the initial research project now some 6 years ago, which is this point of, I think we've all been exposed to the fact that a lot of leaders, whether those are from our states or the country or mayors or industry leaders or philanthropic organizations, have kind of looked and gone abroad and seen these systems that just look fundamentally different from us when it comes to the use of apprenticeship programs. So what I mean by that is, the average age of an apprentice in the United States today is 30. In most countries, it's closer to 16, 17 years old. So the apprenticeship model is used really as a much more deliberate transition strategy for young people from education into the labor market. And the second part of it is apprenticeship in other places is used pretty expansively across the labor market for a range of jobs and industry sectors, whereas here in the United States, for a long history, the narrowness of the application of the apprenticeship model has really been how we've seen it used. It's been a fairly narrow set of occupations that apprenticeship's been present in. And then the last thing I'll say, which is the most important from the apprenticeship standpoint, is really how other countries do workforce development or career technical education, whether that's for in-school or out-of-school youth. They use the apprenticeship model as the way to work and support young people. This idea that what the core of an apprenticeship is, which is a combination of theory and practice, using your hands and applied learning alongside coursework that really creates a foundation that is applicable for a future across the labor market. It's just a fundamentally different use of apprenticeship versus in the United States, it's been traditionally a path to get you one particular job, which has worked extremely well and needs to continue to work extremely well. But really seeing apprenticeship as a foundational experience that's foundational to the social cohesion, to the equity, to the economic competitiveness of a country. So I'll just say, the very, very brief history is that we didn't build that system. And the reason why, we are a country going back to the Smith-Hughes Act, and the Career and Technical Education was a school-based career and technical education system. And we developed a registered apprenticeship system that was deliberately designed to be separate from our education systems. That's something different than, again, how other countries have used the model as really a mainstream post-secondary pathway. The school to work movement in the 90s was our first kind of experimentation with the apprenticeship model. A lot of that generated out of a lot of momentum in the late 80s to try to build a nationwide system. I will say the school to work did not exclusively focus on apprenticeship programs. It very much, for a number of reasons, expanded to a range of work-based learning efforts, which did pose problems for sustainability. But you could point to places like Wisconsin and Georgia and even Minnesota, where their school to work youth apprenticeship programs are still in place today. So the places that did build a very much more well-defined youth apprenticeship model have been able to sustain it. It kind of faded out until the 2000s, where we started to see in places like the Carolinas, where a lot of companies from abroad started putting foreign direct investment and really kind of showing up and being like, why don't you do this? Why don't you connect? Why don't you use apprenticeship? And why don't you connect it to get young people into apprenticeship programs? And I think those models that we've seen, like the Apprenticeship 2000s of the world, programs that we've seen in the Carolinas, and also, there's been a little bit more of a new generation, inspired a lot of people. So where I think we are today is I think that we're actually experimenting with apprenticeship at a systems level when it comes to youth. I think we know it can work. I think we have incredible stories of how it changes young people's lives. I think the central question we're dealing with now is what would it mean to scale it, and how do we scale it? And so the idea of a youth apprenticeship being a mainstream part of our systems, whether those are our youth serving systems or whether those are our K-12 systems, is the work to be done right now. And I would say the reason why it's caught a lot of attention is I think you could say a lot about the affordability and relevance issues in post-secondary education that probably helps build momentum. I think it's central an equity issue, which is that there's a recognition that it's not enough in our labor market anymore just to have post-secondary credentials, that a hidden driver of inequity is really access to work experience, professional networks, mentors. And if we don't have a system to provide that and do it equitably to ensure those experiences are paid and well structured, we're leaving a lot of young people in a very tough position when it comes to being able to access good jobs in our economy. And I think apprenticeship is being seen as a system to help get us there.
Mhm. So great observations. Thank you, Brent. A follow-up that I might have to that is, well, I have several, but there is no law about youth apprenticeships, right? There is one apprenticeship statute from 1937, although there's some efforts to go ahead and change that. But really, the youth apprenticeship program has to do all the requirements of an adult apprenticeship program. There is no difference between the two. So how do we as practitioners and folks on the call differentiate? Do they have to do a full-time adult apprenticeship program? Is there flexibility to tweak it for youth? They still have to have the on-the-job learning. They still have to have the technical instruction, which are, the strong cornerstones of this project. What suggestions do you have for folks about, does it have to be different? Does it have to be the same? How do you customize it to youth?
It's a great question. So yeah, your short answer to your first question is no. There is not a national legal definition for youth apprenticeship. That is because registered apprenticeship is the only kind of actual articulated policy around what apprenticeship program is that is recognized by the Department of Labor. Of course, there's a category of industry recognized apprenticeships. There's regulations around, but that is now officially publicly under some rulemaking. But what I will propose rulemaking, but what I'll say about registered apprenticeship programs is, before we even get to the idea of like hours and competencies, I think anyone who wants to get engaged should just start with the basic building blocks and think about what are kind of, we call the four corners of an apprenticeship program. It's got to have a blend of on-the-job practical learning with the related coursework and instruction. It has to have industry credentials attached to it. The idea of an apprenticeship is that it doesn't prepare you for one job with one employer, but it actually prepares you to be kind of competent within an occupation and use those skills across multiple employers in the labor market. And it has to have this structured mentorship element that really integrates those things. It's this idea that an apprentice is really someone that is learning from a mentor on the job to really reach competency is core. I will say, I'll answer it this way. Right now, youth apprenticeships, to be registered as apprenticeships, to be recognized as an apprenticeship, have to be registered apprenticeships. There is an exception in some states that have codified youth apprenticeship programs. I mentioned Wisconsin earlier. They actually set kind of hours requirements that are below the hour of a registered program. So some states have taken steps to define these things. There's a few of them out there that we can kind of talk about vis-a-vis the registered system. But there's a lot of advantages to going down the registered path, mostly because there's that recognition. There's obviously being able to access a lot of resources. There's also the critical guarantees that a registered apprenticeship can offer that that are not well defined by a range of other programs. I will say this: the text that we're seeing, the legislative text that we're seeing on some of the Build Back Better agenda proposals that Congress is dealing with are calling specifically for youth apprenticeship programs, and putting in the National Apprenticeship Act is trying to articulate what a youth apprenticeship program might look like in the context of the registered system. I think this is an area of huge opportunity that we can be thinking about, within the context of the registered system and the critical guarantees and safety assurances that it provides for apprentices. What does it mean to be a youth program? And on one hand, you could think about it in terms of people and age. I actually think it's about program design. And I would implore folks that are thinking about this, when you want to build something that's a youth apprenticeship, I think you have to be thinking about at what level of the labor market you're trying to come in at, how it creates kind of a foundation or a springboard for someone within that industry. And I think you have to think about partners, whether that's in-school youth. You have to be thinking about how K-12 experience or dual enrollment is built in to the apprenticeship program to allow that seamless transition. Or if you're maybe working with community-based organizations or youth serving organizations, whether those are workforce boards or organizations that typically serve us youth who are out of school, you have to be thinking about that seamless transition for someone to be able to access a full-blown apprenticeship program. So I do think it's critical not just to think about age, but think about the program design, because to really put youth at the center, you have to design this around their experiences. You have to design it around what their needs are and the responsibilities that you have to juggle. And so I just make that encouragement to the field, is that a youth apprenticeship is built for youth. It's not just a program that serves youth.
Great. And it's really a difference between sort of a philosophy and a program as well. So I would, those are all great points, Brent. I would like to sort of shift the conversation a little bit to leadership, partnerships, and the glue that holds youth apprenticeships together, right? And then I'm going to pivot to what the government is doing and a few other things. But I really want folks to understand. I've been having a lot of conversations just this week and last week about these programs. I made a presentation to a state this morning and really encouraged these different partnerships. Can you just talk a little bit about the influence of leadership on developing youth apprenticeships? Or I should say apprenticeships for youth, whether they're in school or out of school. And we're going to hear about that later today from both Andrea and Miriam. But talk a little bit about leadership, talk about partnerships, and talk about the glue or the intermediaries to hold them all together, just for a minute or two, if you would.
Yeah, I always think that, a strong youth apprenticeship program is built on a partnership, but to make a partnership work, you need buy-in from leadership across the multiple kind of industry sectors or industry partners that are required to make that program work. So specifically, what I mean by that is when we talk about building a true youth apprenticeship program, we're talking about making it a mainstream experience, not just something that some young person finds, something that really is there for young people to take advantage of, whether again, they're in the final years of high school, or if you're in the context of working with out of school, populations, or those young folks who have been disconnected from systems that traditionally where we find a lot of youth, how do you actually build a seamless transition into those experiences and those programs? You have to have buy-in from leaders. So if you don't have buy-in of the school leadership to actually design the program in a way that allows for that smooth transition from where a young person is today into an apprenticeship experience, I think that you're going to be really missing the whole point, which is to really use apprenticeships to smooth transitions from young people across settings from learning into work or progressive kind of education over time. The other piece of this is that just to make the program work, you need leaders engaged that are actually putting values that are going to support the success of youth at the forefront. So what I mean by that is a young person who's in an apprenticeship program is kind of got to travel across a lot of different settings just to get the work done. They've got to be doing their paid on the job learning. They've got to be taking some coursework. They might also, in multiple settings, they might have to participate in some other types of auxiliary training or need access to supportive services. You need to have the support from leadership within the companies that are supporting the on-the-job learning, that the mentors and the supervisors know that this young person's balancing a lot of responsibilities, but ultimately this investment by the company is one that pays off and one that meets the values of what they're trying to execute on. On the education side, you actually have to look at, education partners that are willing to recognize the valuable learning that happens within an employer-based setting. And that's not always the case traditionally in terms of what you have to see apprentices having to play catch up or spend more hours or doing training to be able to get access to post-secondary credit, when actually the real learning that's happening on the job should be recognized and valued by education institutions. That takes leadership on the education side to say, not all learning that's good learning happens within our walls. So it takes leadership from the people of where folks are coming from to make sure that these opportunities are readily available. But the execution of this experience to make sure it's youth-centered really takes leadership to understand that we have to do things differently because it's the right thing to do. And it's going to take work to really make sure that young people are successful in these programs.
Yeah, leadership is an interesting one, and those who are listening in, I mean, it doesn't have to be that hard, right? I mean, Colorado was very successful because Governor Hickenlooper embraced it and worked with a business leader in Ginsburg to drive things there. You see other states that have had, well, maybe not gubernatorial leadership, but leadership from the secretary or leadership from a business leader. There's different ways to get that. And Brent, we've seen some mayors who have taken on the leadership at the local and regional level, a college president, a workforce board. So leadership can come in a lot of ways. Can you talk a little bit about the critical value of the intermediary in youth apprenticeship? And then I'm going to go to some federally focused questions for you since I have you on the hot seat.
Somebody has to be accountable for the success of young people to make it work. So an apprenticeship is by design a network. It's a networked partnership where you're combining things that are usually separate, work experience and learning, into a seamless experience. That again goes back to my point of like young people are transitioning across these different settings. If someone's not accountable for that success, you're not going to likely you're going to have issues with young people who are having to juggle a lot of responsibilities across these areas that are going to create issues for the people and the expectations of the program. But B, to watch out for why we're doing this in the first place and make sure young people have the support to succeed in those settings is crucial. So the idea of an intermediary, I think, is obviously critical on a foundational end. I think your point on leadership spot on. Somebody has to stand up and say, this is good for doing by the way of our young people and bring the partners along. But then someone also has to say, here's the organization or here's the organizations or partnership capacity that's really going to make sure this happens and works. Because apprenticeship, the beauty of it is it spreads across these different kind of system partners. What makes it so hard is that it's spread across these system partners. So if no one is kind of accountable in between those things, and that's not saying it has to be a neutral individual that does it all. It could be a segment or a capacity within a particular organization that's maybe playing a prominent role, whether that's a community college, a nonprofit organization, even K-12 districts can play and fill intermediary capacity roles. At the end of the day, intermediary is about accountability and saying, what are our goals to ensure that we're creating opportunities, and particularly we're meeting the needs of people who need these opportunities most? What are responsible for the success of the young people as well as the partners that are invested in the programs? And who's going to be there to actually help organizations do things differently? And I think that change management aspect is often so underappreciated, which is this idea that the idea of a youth apprenticeship program, which is the gold standard and really providing something for young people that is uniquely powerful, and that, you know, thinking about what all it offers, takes work to design and set up and build into the day to day. And somebody has to really kind of see that project as theirs to take it on. And I mean that in the context of a place-based environment, but I also mean that in ensuring that what they're building is going to kind of meet the standards and expectations of all those folks that are involved.
Mhm. And we've seen, and it's not impossible to do studio audience at home, right? I mean, it is hard work. It's not impossible work. We see it happening all the time, and we see different intermediaries. So in Charleston, you're going to get Trident Technical College. Um, in in other places, you're going to get a community college in Western Michigan, who you'll hear from later today. You're going to get a workforce board. You're going to get a CEO or an industry organization. So there's lots of people who can take that role. You know, we have been doing some work both with in-school youth and then with out-of-school youth. And I know when our team first proposed the out-of-school youth, I was like, oh man, this is really hard work to get all the issues related to dislocated, disenfranchised, sometimes disrespected out-of-school youth into pathways and apprenticeship, because you know there's pathways for adults, there's some beginning school pathways for in-school youth, but if you're out of school and out of work, you're almost out of luck with apprenticeship. So we've had a lot of success, Miriam has particularly, which you'll talk about, in putting young people on pathways into registered apprenticeship for those who are out of school. But I guess my question is a simple one, right? Different strategies for in school, different strategies for out of school. And, you know, do you combine those programs, do them separately? I realize this isn't a fully baked proposal, but I know a lot of folks are thinking youth is youth is youth, so we're going to put them in apprenticeship. But I think there are some different strategies and partners you may need at the table. Thoughts?
I agree. I think there's commonalities. I think that a high quality apprenticeship program is a high quality apprenticeship program that stands on its feet. But there's work to be done for any high quality apprenticeship program. If the goal is to have younger people in those programs, again, the average age of an apprentice is 30 in the country for a reason. Apprenticeship programs traditionally do not invest or engage heavily on the front end of what comes into the programs. They have the ability to be selective. They have the ability to kind of look at what the range of applicants are. They have not traditionally reached into the systems where young people are. So at the end of the day, to have more young people into our apprenticeship programs, there's a ton of work to be done just to connect those folks actually to opportunities wherever, whatever system they're in. Again, whether it's high school or working with a youth serving organization. I do think, however, that there is very distinct work to be done depending on the young population you're working with. Each population is going to present challenges to work with. I would say on the high school side, mainstreaming apprenticeship into our high schools is really going to be a critical strategy for how you support a more successful transition and offer another high quality option to so many young people that need it in our high schools. But engineering that into our education systems is work. It's hard work, it's critical work, and it's work that in our view, we have to elevate as a national priority and a strategy. And that's what we mean when we talk about design, when we talk about designed youth apprenticeship programs. On the other hand, and I want to be really kind of clear about this as well, we have to also be looking at youth in apprenticeship programs wholesale. And the administration has prioritized the idea of pre-apprenticeships as a core strategy for doing that. But I think it even goes beyond pre-apprenticeships. And how do existing registered apprenticeships, or how do new registered apprenticeships be designed in a deliberate way that they are going to be accessible to young people? And even if they can't say that this is exclusively who they would be serving, they're really built in terms of their partnerships, in terms of their structure, to be successful for young people who really need these opportunities. When we think about the investments in infrastructure that we're all excited to be seeing soon, when we think about a lot of the Build Back Better investments, that's a big part of the work ahead of us, is how do we actually open up the apprenticeship ecosystem to a lot of people who it is generally ignored or not deliberately connected with. And frankly, we talk a lot about young people building social capital with employers. Our apprenticeship systems, our industries need to build social capital with our youth. And I think apprenticeship is a critical strategy for doing that. It has to be a very intentional strategy. So again, whether that's working directly with high school to design a program so you get that seamless transition out of high school, whether that's designing a program intentionally to ensure that you're creating job opportunities for young people in our communities that really need them. I think it's hard, challenging work, but it's work that has to be done, and it's something that's a priority for the department.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point, Brent. And I look at, as much as this helps young people, I look at our friends in North Carolina, up in Guilford County or somewhere around North Carolina. They have a strong pipeline of youth coming in to serve those communities, to serve those employers. So the benefit is not just for the young person. The benefit is huge for employers, right? And so, right, it's not just, oh, let's help these young people. I've worked in workforce for 40 years. This is one of the best win-win situations for both workers and employers that I've seen in terms of expansion, future work, skilled workforces, and all of that. So, and they'll be our best advocates for it. We have about 4 minutes left. I have two other quick questions for you, Brent. One is going to focus on diversity, and one's going to focus on the federal government, which you know a little bit about. So, it took the president about 23 minutes to start issuing executive orders on diversity, equity, and those sort of things. At the same time, the secretary has been very early on talking about not only about apprenticeship but also about equity and infrastructure, among other things, which we're all excited to hear about. But just you mentioned it earlier, but just a few seconds on the opportunities on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know if you heard Andres, our speaker, earlier, but I loved his metaphor of, diversity is one thing, but inclusion is mixing. Diversity is mixing people up. But I can't remember it, but it was much more sophisticated than what I'm saying. But about making it work and including people. So can you just talk a little bit about the opportunities that youth apprenticeship has for DEI?
Yeah, I think I guess I kind of think about it just very quick at a high level, in two critical ways. One, I think what's exciting about what makes youth apprenticeship hard is no one gets off free. And what I mean by that is it forces us to interrogate. If you really want to build an equitable program, it's not enough to confront the systemic inequities about who gets what opportunities in our K-12 system, or who gets access to post-secondary education, or who gets that first job or that internship in the labor market. A youth apprenticeship program forces you to confront all three of those challenges. And when we think about the structural inequities within our education systems and our labor market, those things reinforce each other. And youth apprenticeship is something that, to do it well with equity at the center, you can't ignore any one piece of it. You can't engineer one side of it. You can't just work on the education piece. You can't just work on employers to hire, quote unquote, more diverse candidates. And so I think that what makes youth apprenticeship challenging and hard about working across those stakeholders is exactly its great potential. It's because no one gets off on letting free sort of what has reinforced a lot of the narrow channel to opportunity that exists within our labor market, and has been a long-standing issue. So I think on one hand, I think the way that we think about youth apprenticeship is that it should be intentionally designed to confront all those barriers at once. And program design should recognize what those challenges are, from very tactical things like, what are the entry requirements for someone who gets access to this? How is that cutting off opportunities? Obviously, the wraparound services and supports and things like access to transportation, equipment, and resources to actually ensure someone can stay or persist within a program. So I think on one end, that how we think about program design and how youth apprenticeship in particular, really forces us to engage with really hard questions across a lot of those system partners and get them to work together differently, I think is key. The other piece, and the thing I would say about the department as a whole when we think about DEI, is it's both a question of like how we do the work. And so I kind of just mentioned that a little bit on the program design side, but also who we partner with. And I mean that from a community perspective, is to say, to really do equity in the way, to really put that at the heart of the work, it has to start with very clear engagement of the stakeholders on the front end within communities that have a very clear role in those partnerships, that have a very clear role in providing input on what the programs would look like, who they would serve, and frankly, what success looks like needs to be defined by folks within those communities that these programs are trying to disrupt inequities for. So I do think it's the question of like, what are the types of organizations, who are the types of partners that being around the table, are critically important just as much as how we design the programs as well. when we think about that in terms of our grant investments, for example, in terms of how we're be looking at not just the types of strategies we're investing in, but how are we ensuring that there's a more diverse set of grantees for all of the Department of Labor's grants than we've ever had in our history. The last thing I'll say is this around DEI is I think there's a real moment because there is an openness with employers to really look at DEI and say, what we're doing right now is not addressing the goals. So let's do things differently. And youth apprenticeship is doing something very differently for industry that is very used to sitting back and waiting for talent. It's very used to not investing in entry level training. Its industry is increasingly used also to not actually having, really being able to kind of look across and pull its talent from competitors. So this idea of investing deeply in a talent pipeline is something that we've all in workforce development, and Eric, you've been a pioneer on for years. We've wanted to get industry to do more. I think the DI imperative in the moment we're in is an opportunity to actually get them to do things differently. And I don't think that's something we can underappreciate when we ask employers why they've taken and put their toe in the water around things like youth apprenticeship.
That's great. Well, Brent, you've successfully run out the clock on my most important question, but I'm going to
I was trying as much as I can. Can I get a little fun? No, just go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm going to extend it by 15 seconds. So, what can we expect from the federal government over the next few years and on youth apprenticeship or apprenticeship? And if you give us a very brief answer to that, we'll move on with our program.
Definition, policy, and guidance. We're going to continue to put resources into the apprenticeship field to expand, build a more diverse, more better integrated apprenticeship system with our education and workforce systems. But to do that, we need clear definitions on things. And whether it's in guidance, regulation, legislation, we're going to be working on that over the coming years. And it's a key topic of focus in the Secretary's Advisory Committee on Apprenticeship, particularly when we look at things like pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship. These are areas where we appreciate the field's done incredible innovation and work that we want to learn from. Now, how do we reciprocate by providing clarity about what these models look like and in a way that reflects good practice on the ground? And then continued investment. Congress continues to put resources into apprenticeship, something that we're obviously very hopeful for with the Build Back Better agenda is significant increase in those resources. I think you can look for an investment strategy from us. There's been a lot of experimentation and looking at kind of where are the different levers to expand apprenticeship, who are the great partners to work with. I think what you'll see is a great attempt by us to really say, here are the things we not want to double down on, not just the next 12 months, but the next 12 years, and really try to create a more sustained, clear investment strategy for registered apprenticeship, because that's what we know you all need on the ground as well, to work with your partners and know that support's going to be there. So some level of stability and clarity on our investment approach, as well as clarity and definition around innovative program models that we've learned a lot about from you all.
That's great, Brent. And, my team, Miriam, never lets me go over, but she'll let you go over because you had such great things to say. Lastly, I'll say before Miriam gives us the hook is go to our website, folks. We have a recently released blog on pre-apprenticeship. We have a pre-apprenticeship framework there. We have some youth apprenticeship, other activities at jff.org/apprenticeship. So there's good materials there. Brent, Senior Policy Advisor with the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. He's one of the good guys, as are all those folks over at DOL these days. So we're really looking forward to working with you. And thank you so much for your time on this busy National Apprenticeship Week.
Thank you all, and appreciate JFS partnership on so many things. Always a pleasure, always to be here. And again, happy National Apprenticeship Week.
Thank you. Miriam?
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much, Brent and Tamisha, for really setting the stage today and really elevating the importance of youth apprenticeships. In the last conversation, we really got some great intelligence around what making youth apprenticeship a mainstream experience. Brent talked about what a strong youth apprenticeship system would require, that being strong partnerships. So our next session will dig deeper into strong partnerships. And then the last thing I'll elevate is about how we should all think about program design, a program design that puts youth at the center. So we are going into a 5-minute break where we'll share a video during that break from our apprentices where they'll share some information about why they apprentice. So with that, we're going to go into a 5-minute break and then we'll get started again with our next round of panel discussions. Thank you everyone for sticking with us so far.
So my day just ended. It was a very successful day today.
And I'm in the Medical Science Academy.
I'm in marketing YA.
So I'm actually going for business.
The skills and experience I have gained through my youth apprenticeship, I can take with me throughout my whole life.
I learned to use a new business software.
Public speaking and my communication skills have gone through the roof.
I get time during my day at school to work and earn money for my college.
Train like a technician, but to eventually become a certified tech.
Being an apprentice really gives you experience that others probably won't have, so it looks great on your resume.
But my favorite part about being a youth apprentice is that I got both my friends to join me. So now every time I go to work, I get to work with my friends, which makes the job a ton more fun.
See all my friends with $250,000 worth of student loan debt. I don't have any of that. I don't have to worry about none of that.
I'm stable, I have a stable job. If I get laid off, I could easily get another job within the union.
I love being a youth apprentice, and I think you will too.
So yeah, I hope this kind of gives you a first glance at what youth apprentice programs have to offer.
If you have the opportunity, take it.
If you're not an apprentice, what are you waiting for?
Hello, my name is Vasiki Kone. I'm a second-year apprentice here at Machine Specialties. Coming from an immigrant family, my dad always stressed to me the importance of getting my education and be financially stable. My senior years showed me many opportunities and avenues that I took, and I chose the apprenticeship as a means to fulfill my career. The apprenticeship served to me as an opportunity to still get hands-on experience and be able to get my education. Plus it was free, which for me was beneficial. Within the program, I've learned to do things that I want to do in my career. I have mentors who help me along the way. I come in constantly challenged to give my very best, and I'm always striving to basically go up the next level. I've loved my experience thus far, and this is why I apprentice.
My name is Tremont Kelly. I'm in the GAP apprenticeship program, and I'm a second-year apprentice at Machine Specialties Incorporated. I didn't have an idea about what career I wanted to choose after high school, but I always knew I wanted it to be hands-on, and I had to be learning new things every day. The GAP program offered both these, education for free and job experience. Advanced manufacturing to me before the program was an entirely new field, but with the everyday help of teachers, mentors, and my fellow apprentices, learning how to work in a manufacturing shop environment was easier than I expected. Getting to know all the people you meet through the program is an experience in itself. From them, I grew as a worker, a student, and as an adult outside of work. I'm grateful for the GAP program for making this opportunity for high school students, and even more grateful for MSI for providing an environment for me to overachieve. Thanks to everyone at MSI for guiding me through this experience, and thanks to the GAP program for making this experience possible.
For me, it was a lot better than going to school. Now, college ain't the way for everybody, I guess. This is, for me, it worked great. I got a house, I got 2 kids, I got, my life's together. When really I didn't have much guidance, I just kind of walked into this, and now I'm doing great. So, and then a lot of people that I know get out of college and they're making what I made as a helper, basically, without any benefits. Like here, we have all our benefits, health insurance, all that stuff. It's just nice to not have to worry about money, really. I'm stable, I have a stable job. If I get laid off, I could easily get another job within the union. My kids, they always got food, they always have a place, they got toys, I don't have to struggle. We're making art basically out of rocks.
My name is Rachel Witt. I've been an apprentice for 1.5 years, and I'm an 043 maintenance electrician. We build aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines for the Navy. That's our customer. My mom was a single mom of 3, and she couldn't afford to send us all to college. I've always wanted to learn a trade. I've always wanted to be an electrician. My family's been electricians for generations, and I can't wait to follow in their footsteps. I've never been a college person, but the Apprentice School offers a chance to go to an advanced course where you can get a bachelor degree. Once I've learned my
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our session. We are getting ready for our roundtable discussion where we have an opportunity to dig deeper in a conversation around building youth apprenticeship opportunities and career pathway systems for all young people. Before we jump into that, I must say we had a great opening session and want to really thank our CEO, Maria Flynn, and board member Andres Tapia about their conversation on inclusive leadership and young people in the world of work, really setting up the stage for the event today. Then you heard from Tamisha Bridges Mansfield and Eric Sells-Now and Brent Parton about how JFF and DOL are meeting this incredible opportunity. Now we're about to dig deeper and really hear from practitioners. So it is my pleasure to introduce Andrea Messing-Mathy, who you met earlier on, who's a director at JFF in the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Andrea will lead a panel discussion with some leading experts today about how they develop partnerships to build equitable apprenticeships. So Andrea, I'm turning it over to you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our roundtable discussion, Digging Deeper, Building Youth Apprenticeship Opportunities and Career Pathway Systems for All Young People. I want to preface that this is a pure roundtable discussion. We have not practiced our remarks or our flow. We've asked youth apprenticeship practitioners and stakeholders to join us today because each of these folks has a unique perspective on the power and the promise of youth apprenticeship and the role of young people in work, particularly when it's intentionally connected to a broader work-based learning continuum, furthers post-secondary opportunities for young people, and directly involves employers in both the design and the execution of a program. I am joined today by 5 amazing practitioners. Michelle Jacobs, Senior Director for Youth Development at United Way Greater Atlanta. Jacob Moss, the Chief Executive Officer for West Michigan Works. Mary Ellen Sprinkle, the President and CEO of the Core Network. Edison Frere, the Director of Gateway Initiatives at JEVS Human Services. And Melissa Stowasser, the Assistant Vice President for Community Partnerships at Trident Technical College. I wanted to reflect for a moment, if I could be this indulgent, on something that Maria mentioned earlier, the moment of opportunities in March 1993. And it made me think immediately of this conversation I had with my mother. That was my senior year of high school, and I was sitting at the kitchen table and I was paralyzed. I'm the child of German immigrants, and I have a vivid memory of my 17-year-old self sitting there asking my mom, why can't I have an apprenticeship? I'm not ready to make these choices about my life. I'm not ready to figure out what comes next, and I feel really unprepared. I think her response was, they don't do that here, but I'm glad that she turned out to be a little bit wrong. And things turned out well for me eventually, but not without some very real stumbles, the support of caring mentors and adults, and workplace and education experiences that launched me into new opportunities. And I always look back on that experience and how differently my pathway might have turned out if I'd had the opportunity to practice and learn by doing differently than I did in my pathway. So what I'd like to lean into today during our conversation and during our roundtable discussion is the need to build a system to support the work that we're all trying to do and the partnerships that are required to get us there. We also want to lean into the idea that youth apprenticeship is not connected to a broader vision for career pathways from exploration to preparation, means that we might keep getting an awful lot of islands of excellence, but not a system that helps to create a bridge between education and work for young people. And I wrote down something that Brent Parton said earlier, that a youth apprenticeship is something that should be built for youth and not just something that serves youth. And I want us to kind of keep that in our forefront, that we are serving a different population, and that it means something different to serve these folks. So I want to just dive into this, and I will start by starting this conversation, and I'll ask Edison actually to respond to my first question. Why do we need to think differently about young people and how they enter the world of work? And if you don't mind just reintroducing yourselves and where you're situated, that would be great.
Good afternoon. I'm talking to you from Philadelphia, and I am part of Jeff's Human Services, and part of my job is sort of thinking about the intersection of the workforce system, education, but also this idea of civic engagement, and what I say, embracing the intellect, the mind, and the soul of youth, because this is not just about workforce preparation, but preparation for life. And I think that, Andrea, I had a different answer for you if COVID wasn't here. And I've had to think a lot about what COVID has done for us. And, we are always looking at the critical and sort of stressful situations of COVID, but might we want to, sort of invert that and say, what have we learned about what young people need to enter the workforce? And part of this is, if we take a political phrase and say, if we really commit to building back better, we definitely need to rethink the future of work, what that looks like, because there's been digital transformations, as well as what it will require from the next generation. So I'm sort of been thinking about this because I keep hearing this word about the great resignation, and how stressed the employers are, and how the system doesn't know how to respond, and this notion of we don't know where we're heading. Might this also be what I want to deem the great awakening phenomenon among young people? Might they be actually challenging our systems and saying, yes, you have built this, to do things to us. And as you said with Brent, we need to work to build something for youth with youth. So are we listening to their messages about sort of, what does meaningful learning imply now? And how does that sort of translate to what a meaningful work-based learning experiences look like? As well as, I think, and this is my personal, and I'm being reading, is this notion of what does human connection, mean post-COVID world? Because I think young people are looking for meaning and human connection. So what this highlights for me is that we really need to look at what experiential learning is, and how important that is for young people, and how might youth apprenticeships fit into that as a gold standard of experiential learning.
Thank you, Edison. And I'm wondering, Michelle, if I can ask you to respond to that a little bit. I think particularly this idea that we need to look at the role of experiential learning and what role that plays in shaping the way young people enter into the world of work.
Sure. So I'm Michelle Jacobs with United Way of Greater Atlanta. Thinking about what Edison has said, I really know that youth want to be able to have the opportunity to show up to work as their authentic self, right? Their skills, we need to support their skills and their abilities, and not allow maybe what they're dressed like, or the tattoos, or the different things that we would may frown upon, right? That isn't a reflection of their abilities and their skills. And so I think we do need to think about experiential learning, but we also need to think about their perception, right? Their perception of work does not fit with our current, perception of work, the corporate suit, tie, dress, like that doesn't equate to the population that we're definitely speaking about. And I think in terms of experiential learning, if I think about the work we're building out at United Way, we realize that youth need the opportunity to be able to explore, right? They need the time to have more career exploration, more career exposure, in order for them to really determine what is it that they want to do. I think youth apprenticeships provide that opportunity. It provides you the opportunity to explore within a particular field before taking like that final step to say, this is exactly what I want to do. And I think through the process of the youth apprenticeship process, you get to do that experiential learning. You get to, test different areas of, if we're talking about IT, maybe you get to do coding, maybe you get to step into cybersecurity. So you get to explore a lot of different things before you say, this is finally where I land. Or like where you were speaking of your 17-year-old selves when you weren't sure of the direction, I think the youth apprenticeship gives them that opportunity. So I think that's really what experiential learning could potentially look like.
I want to offer Melissa a chance. I think you've had kind of a longer history with youth apprenticeship and building that out. I'm curious if you could respond a little bit to how you've seen the role of the youth apprenticeship play in shaping the lives of the young people that you encounter.
Thanks so much. I'm Melissa Stowasser, and I'm with Trident Technical College, but I'm also serving as part of the intermediary organization for the Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeship Program. And our program was born back in 2014 at the request of an employer. So it accelerated quickly, and it's become pretty robust in terms of the size for a local regional youth apprenticeship program, even though we want to grow it more. And we have had those kinds of experiences. We had a young man who thought he was absolutely sure what he wanted to do in life, and he got into a youth apprenticeship program and started working through it, and then just stopped really working toward it. He was not very successful in the classes. He ended up getting fired from his job. The very next year, though, he applied for a different pathway, and now he's successfully employed in that career after having tried out the first and finding it wasn't right for him, and then being able to explore the next. And I think that when we start younger with allowing students to have those experiential experiences, they can make those shifts at an early age before it's too late. I think of my daughter, you're telling your stories. I think of my daughter who did her college, or some of her college work, and then went off to Disney with this vision of where she was going in the future, and started in the college program there. And at the end of the summer came back and very apologetically said to me, I think I want to do something different, because she had exposure to that. And she's apologizing to me and asking if it's okay if she changes the rest of her college pathway. And I'm like, do it now, before you have mortgages to pay and orthodontia put on children's teeth. This is the time to figure that out. And so I think youth apprenticeship really allows us that opportunity. Are you looking for other examples there, Andrea?
I mean, I think that's a good one to start, because I'd actually like to pivot a little bit to Mary Ellen Sprinkle to talk a little bit about kind of that role of kind of that great awakening and the role of preparatory work, and helping us think through how young people might actually help us do some of our work better.
Thank you. So I'm Mary Ellen Sprinkle, the president and CEO of the Corps Network, which is the National Association of Service and Conservation Corps. There are about 140 corps currently operating around the country, and they operate similarly to youth apprenticeships in many cases, engaging young people in experiential learning, particularly in conservation and land and resource management. And corps have been doing this, some of them for 6 or 7 decades, and have been providing young people opportunities to explore a variety of careers in the conservation and resource management space. And particularly young people who would not necessarily have an opportunity to go into the field. The conservation field is largely more affluent and white. So it exposes young people, particularly in environmental justice communities, to the very things that they are dealing with every day, and how they can be part of the solution. To Edison's point, corps very often utilize AmeriCorps as a pathway for engaging young people in this experiential learning, and it provides that civic engagement piece. It allows the young people who participate to feel like they are doing meaningful work and contributing to maybe climate change mitigation or something larger than themselves. So I agree with what everyone said before about having an opportunity to explore different things, to feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves. And young people, I think, want that more than, say, my generation when we went to work. People want to feel like they are part of something, a solution, which I think is terrific. And so CORES, we have been working with a lot of our partners, and partners are absolutely critical to think about CORES as a pre-apprenticeship model to some of the full-time apprenticeships where young people can explore different careers. And I would say very often young people decide that maybe working out in 95-degree weather and bugs, or the rain and the sleet, they might decide that working outside is not for them, and that may be just as important as deciding what is for them. And they may want to, go back to school or pursue a different kind of job. But absolutely agree that experiential learning is important. And a goal of the CORE Network, particularly as we engage in conversations around maybe a civilian climate corps initiative with this new administration, is how do we make sure that there is something of value to the workforce for young people who participate in that, and how do we formalize some of the experiential learning that is currently going on and has been going on in such a way that young people can leave that experience with something that has meaning in the workforce and to employers. So we are very excited about this focus on youth apprenticeship and how to take these pockets of work that are currently going on and put them together in such a structured, formalized way that that they have meaning, because we've seen so much success through the CORE model that we know it works.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And I actually would like to pivot a little bit to Jacob, as I think this maybe gets to the youth apprenticeship space is maybe a little bit new for you, or even kind of thinking about young people in this capacity. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to kind of what are some of the ways, either vertical or horizontal, that your organization is thinking differently about the role that you play in helping to create that bridge for young people between education and work.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And what a privilege it is to be among so many amazing experts across the country. And thanks, JFF, for pulling the event together. My name is Jacob Moss. I have the privilege to serve as CEO for West Michigan Works. We are a 7-county workforce development board in West Michigan, and really jumped into the apprenticeship space in around 2015. But Brent might be a little disappointed in me because it's not just focused on youth apprenticeships. We're focused on the broader spectrum of adults who might be looking at their next step on their career pathway, or transitioning into a new industry altogether. But certainly we have served youth, primarily older youth, maybe considered out of school youth, even though I hate to label any of the youth. I almost think of them as young adults, maybe who don't have fully developed prefrontal cortexes, and are challenging with understanding where their next step is or how to problem solve in some spaces. But for us as our organization, West Michigan Works, several individuals have become skilled at understanding the human-centered design process. We heard Edison allude to it a little bit, and some of the language that he was using, that they must be skilled at JEVs too. We've had JEVs out on site and had some great one-on-one conversations with them around what we were doing versus sharing best practices to what they're doing. So always great to see them again. And pre-pandemic, we surveyed our youth on what they wanted out of our youth program. That's a core element of the human-centered design process, to involve people at the tail end of your process, in the beginning of the process, and finding out what was important to them. And so a few things stood out: meaningful experiences and opportunity. But I think most importantly to them was this sense of belonging, which is really heartbreaking if you actually think about where many of our youth are coming from. Our talent solutions team has worked really hard at providing meaningful experiences for our youth, and has even redesigned many of our spaces across our region to become more accommodating to how hip and cool our youth are, and provide them the space to have a sense of belonging. We also have a business solutions team that facilitates collaboration among employers, workforce and economic developers, educators, K through 12 and post-secondary, through our industry councils. We have an Agribusiness Talent Council, Construction Careers Council, Discover Manufacturing, West Michigan Tech Talent, and West Michigan Health Careers Council. Representing each of our region's high demand industries, the councils have focused on career awareness for our youth. It can start as early as middle school and be as simple as employers visiting to talk about unique career opportunities, or can require a little more coordination with school field trips where the manufacturers open their doors, the students tour their facilities, and hear and see careers and career pathways firsthand. Or it can be slightly more complex work, like creating or realigning curriculum based on job analysis of their in-demand occupations. The councils are responsible for development of several new apprenticeship programs for West Michigan region, and West Michigan Works currently holds the apprenticeship standards for 27 occupations with 56 employers and 80 active apprentices today. Since 2015, we've had 334 apprentices and have added across all of our industries, even though we really started with a medical assistant apprenticeship program. We have two full-time success apprenticeship coordinators helping employers create and expand apprenticeship opportunities. And they're the liaison between the employers and Department of Labor, helping them to develop their own program or providing sponsorship of a program. So our role really as West Michigan Works is reporting to a workforce development board is to be the bridge, the partner. We are the sponsor of the intermediary, but we're the organization that's going to provide unbiased advice and evidence-based career coaching to youth and assist with their personal career goals and aspirations. In many ways, we're a convener, supporter, and most importantly, a partner. We have so many amazing organizations that we partner with in West Michigan as the work we're trying to do, as all of us are trying to do, and the impact we are trying to have is much bigger than any one of our individuals or organizations.
So I really like to push on something that Jacob just said. I mean, he talks about themselves as the bridge, and I'm wondering if I can pivot, let's say, to Edison. Although I think all of you are positioned to answer this question. Do you see that your role as that bridge has either strengthened or changed as a result of the pandemic? Like you're digging in a little deeper now. How do you see that maybe your role as that kind of that bridge, how that maybe has changed over time?
So it's a good question because I think that since the pandemic, it's actually become an even more critical role that agencies providing services or working with young adults really reflect and think about what exactly are we doing and how are we fitting to an ecosystem. I don't think we have the luxury anymore to work as individual agencies or to just think about a collection of agencies or to focus on the fact that, as a service provider agency and thinking about the next grant and thinking of between the tension of competition and collaboration with like-minded and partners. And it's elevated the conversation from, what are we doing to build our capacity to function as a youth apprenticeship intermediary to how do we build the regional sort of connective tissue to strengthen this ecosystem? So we're being, since the pandemic, we've accelerated that kind of conversation. Given that we don't have a South Carolina youth apprenticeship model or Wisconsin apprenticeship model, we're really approaching this as a civic organizing effort. So in Philadelphia, we approach it by sort of building a platform. We're calling it the Apprenticeship PHL, Philadelphia, Apprenticeship PHL, which is based in, the regional Philadelphia area, and sort of saying, let's bring together that collective efforts of like-minded agencies that sort of can lead to deep conversations about how do we play different roles as a supporter, as a convener, as an educator, as an intermediary in terms of youth apprenticeships or summer jobs or mental health or violence prevention, and look at what it takes to build a system that leaves a long-standing infrastructure that we can build upon as we look also what the future federal investments are sort of being put in place. And as we see the changes in the reauthorization of the Apprenticeship Act, sort of formalizing this youth apprenticeship model. So we're looking to do this because the urgency is that our urban, especially in our area, our urban education systems are stressed. They can, they just need to be able to serve young people every day. So it behooves the partners to think about how do we strengthen the ecosystem? How do we play our particular role? But also, how do we build a space for each one of us to have a critical piece in building and growing this infrastructure to support our education partners.
Michelle, I'm wondering if I can ask you to respond to that, kind of this idea of approaching this as a regional collective or collaborative, kind of this coalition of the willing that are like, come on, everybody, let's get on the bus. I'm wondering if you
That
can
magical word, coalition of the willing. So, United Way is, Edison is exactly right. United Way is playing a similar role as the intermediary, where we are really building out a youth apprenticeship ecosystem that's called Career Ready ATL. Career Ready ATL is kind of focused, if you can think about a work-based learning continuum, where you start with career exposure first, there's some career preparation, and then you're ending with youth apprenticeship as like your training um, into moving into like that career, that job. And so as a part of this ecosystem that we're building out, we've been very intentional to say that we're focused on youth that are furthest from opportunity. So we're focused on 14 to 24-year-olds furthest from opportunity, essentially for us in the greater Atlanta region. That means our Black and our brown youth that would not have the opportunity to be a part of a youth apprenticeship program. So what does that mean that as an intermediary, who do we need to pull together in order to make this to be successful, right? So for us, we are definitely taking a deeper dive into looking at what the school systems are doing. So we're looking at work-based learning from the school system perspective, because we're focused on in-school youth and out-of-school youth. But then we have to look at what is our workforce development system doing? And how does that connect to, your WIOA dollars of what's happening within school and out of school youth and what your local workforce boards are doing, right? And you need to rally those troops together. And then you take another step back to really think about who's really furthest from opportunity when you're just looking at from a racial equity lens. You're really talking about, your youth that are system involved, right? So you're talking about your foster youth, you're talking about juvenile justice youth, right? So those are two different systems that you now have to add on to the school system and the workforce system. We are not trying to make all of these systems align. We're not, it's not a choir. We're not trying to get everyone to sing together. But what we are trying to do is to make it be known that let's not overlook, this group, right? We've done that for long enough, and we need to make sure that these youth and young adults have the opportunity. So the way that we're thinking about this is that the youth is going to be at the center of everything that we do. We've done listening sessions to really think about, like, as we're building this ecosystem, how do we build it from the person that we're building it for, right? You have all of these systems that are doing all these different things. We can go and talk to the leads of each of those systems, try to get in a room and figure it out together. But how many of us have done that before, right? You pull this collaborative together, you have this great idea, and you're like, everybody's going to be on board because everyone cares about the youth and young adults. And you get in a room and like everybody doesn't care in the same way, right? So if you start with a group that you're actually building or making the changes for, the ecosystem being the youth, we're starting with them. And so for us, we have definitely talked about hiring a youth leader, a young adult who would be able to, I guess essentially it could be like a youth apprenticeship at United Way, but they're going to be at the center and helping us to really think through what are the core components that you would need, your wraparound services. What are the areas that maybe we need to start in first, looking at data? But they will be a part of those conversations from the beginning. So we're making sure that this ecosystem is really built for, having the opinions for who we're building it for. So I would definitely agree with Edison that we're doing the same thing. I just think it's probably more systems because we're talking about Greater Atlanta. So you're just not talking about just the city of Atlanta, but you're talking about a larger region, which is about 13 counties. And so we have to be very specific with who, we're letting into the room. So we think about all of those systems, but it's also about who are those anchor partners that you need to have, in play. You need to think about, you need to have your philanthropic partners because you do need to braid and blend the funding of, your public and your private. So you need to have your, your partners in play that can do the public funding. But then you also need to think about the ones that are actually going to implement the system and your employer. So we have multiple systems that's a part of it, but then you have multiple players. So it's a very complex, ecosystem that we're building out. We're taking our time. We're really, taking baby steps and getting there. But I think when we think about the horizontal and vertical, I think we're doing the both. It's a both and really ensuring that we're basically building out the best thing for the youth and young adults in Atlanta. And youth apprenticeships definitely is what we see as a solution to economic mobility.
So I think it's really, I want to push on this thing that you said, we are not a choir, right? I think sometimes we have this impetus, like we want to boil the ocean, we want to do it all at once. And I want to pivot a little bit to to Melissa, because we've talked about this before. Like sometimes it's just like pull the Band-Aid off, start small, but just start. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to kind of like the role of partnerships and the role that those partnerships have played in helping you kind of build this over time, and how, to Michelle's point, like you're not a choir, right? You're kind of rowing in the same direction, but we're not all singing in tune.
Well, I was sitting and listening to wonderful colleagues here, or peers here, and thought how wonderful it is that you're creating this wonderful ecosystem within which this can exist and grow and flourish. We didn't start that way at all. We started sort of the opposite direction, as Andrea has kind of alluded to, because I had been working with our K-12 partners for years to build seamless educational pathways for students. And I had a peer who was working with business and industry leaders doing adult apprenticeship programs. And it wasn't until we were approached by a company, because Boeing came to town and terrified all the smaller companies, and it happened to be a German-based company who was willing to say, will you do a youth apprenticeship program? It's interesting because he actually, to Andrea's point earlier, he actually said to his HR director, where are my apprentices? And when she pointed out the adults on the floor, he said, no, the young ones. And she said, we don't do that here. And his charge to her was, why not make it happen? And so we just pulled our partners. I had been working again with K-12 and he'd been working with industry, and we pulled them all to the table and we said, we've been asked to do this. What a great idea. How do we do this? And so we ended up with 6 manufacturing companies who wanted to start this. And they started all getting around the table and talking about what this could look like. And we kept envisioning, and all the partners trying to figure out how this could look and what this could be for this company or the small group of companies in this one pathway. And they started getting excited. And we had to say, oh, let's do one and let's see if we can do it well. And so from that, we've grown into 9 different industry sectors and 18 to 20 occupations each year, depending upon who's hiring. And so now we're starting to really look at how do we build out this ecosystem and pull in more partners to assist us. You know, we have the chamber on board, but now how do we get the Urban League on board? And how do we get big brothers, big sisters to the table? And how do we now start really being strategic about how we are meeting the needs of our local community, both the employers who have critical workforce needs, but also the citizens, the gold mine of students who are here who can really hone their skills and be refined and polished to take those great jobs. And so it's a little different approach, but you can't do it without the partners, and you start with the partners you have. Every region is going to be different. We've learned that. Who are the partners you can start with? Rip the Band-Aid off, start small, continue to create your ecosystem. If you wait for it, you may never start.
So I think it's really important for us to focus on, because I think that we all have different perspectives on how this works based on our own context. And Mary Ellen, I'm wondering if I can pivot to you a little bit to talk about kind of the role of partnerships in the work that you're trying to do. And you can talk a little bit kind of like how you've seen your role in that space.
Sure. I really appreciated listening to the previous panelists, and I think Atlanta and Philadelphia and Melissa definitely are a little bit ahead of where the core network is in terms of entering into the youth apprenticeship space. So I'm interested in learning about what has been worked, what has not worked. The other thing that's a little bit different about the core network is we're a national organization. We represent community-based organizations all across the country. So I was interested in Melissa's point, every community is going to be different and the partners are going to need to be different. So where our cores have been successful doing this on the community level, they have done local labor market analysis. They have engaged local employers and local community colleges, and they have built an ecosystem in each community. From the core network perspective, as we look at this sort of as a big opportunity, we operate in a space, conservation, resource management, where I think career pathways are a little bit less defined at this point. Industry recognized credentials, apprenticeships don't necessarily exist. So we are looking forward to working with partners to build some of what some of the previous speakers have already done. We have partnerships with the Federal Land Management Agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, and they will give Corps members who complete a certain number of hours non-competitive hiring authority in the federal hiring process. So that's one area where we want to continue to partner and see if we can maybe drive that down to the state and local level. NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also gives Corps members a credential for completing certain kinds of work. We are thinking about at the national level, who are the employers, the end employers in the conservation and natural resource space. In some communities, it might be solar and water management. In other communities, it might be firefighting or tree planting or invasive species removal. So someone made the point about boiling the ocean, and I have often been accused of trying to do that because I like to look at these huge sort of potential partnerships and sort of all of the opportunity and maybe get a little bit overwhelmed. But I'd be interested from hearing from other panelists how you have kind of identified specific opportunities and employers and built pieces as opposed to trying to sort of boil the ocean, which I think is kind of where we are now. The reconciliation package currently includes about $30 billion for CCC kind of work. And I want to make sure that for the young people that participate, they leave with something of value. And whether that's in solar panel installation in an urban community or in firefighting or hazardous fuel removal in Montana or Wyoming. I want to make sure that it's got something for everybody, which kind of leads back to my boil the ocean problem. But I'm really glad that we have some really smart people who have done this and figured it out.
So Jacob, I'd actually love to pivot that question to you, kind of the connecting to the local need. As you think about your role in as a workforce board and your role as kind of that bridge builder that you mentioned earlier, where do you see, like, how are you determining what's the right thing to focus on? I always think about this as an XY axis of high demand, but also high need. So how are you thinking about, like, where are you getting your information, and where are you thinking about how to focus on different occupations in different industries?
Yeah, we pull from, Andrea, that's a great question. We pull from a number of different sources. So we were, in that past, we've used burning glass to get a lot of data and tool and insights. EMSI has some great tools around that too. So MZ, some people refer to as, and we also work closely with our state agency, the Bureau of Labor Market Information and Strategic Initiatives. I have to say that really slow because it's such a mouthful and people are like, what is that? It's bureaucracy at its finest, that we put the longest label on it and we call them LMI or BLMI. But they're fantastic to work with, right? So Dr. Scott Powell and his team are really taking a look at, what are the wages in certain industries and occupations, and historical trends, right? Edison alluded to it earlier. Like, I think we have to recognize that, that 18 years that I have in workforce development, I've just learned the last 2 that I know nothing about workforce development. I have so much to relearn or learn new now because so much has changed because of the pandemic and behaviors, right? So, the historical data around what hot jobs are might not be the same tomorrow, even though we've been on a pretty good trend as to knowing what is high demand and in demand occupations. In our state alone, we've lost 220,000 women in the workforce. There is nothing that can be more disruptive than that, than losing 220,000 women when our population of our state is only 10 million. Half of the 10 million are probably of working age or in that sweet spot of working. And about 60% of them are in that spot. So we've lost a lot as far as labor force participation. I think if anything, it's, we have a lot of the tools and resources, and we're trying to learn as, we continue to learn more in the midst of this global pandemic. How do we share some of that with whether it's our, partners like Mary, Ellen, or if it's, our local school districts or our community colleges that are all struggling with the same. How do they ensure that they're still training people on in-demand industries and occupations? The sweet spot for us is yes, we're working with job seekers, and trying to help them figure out what their passions are, and you know, through assessments and other things, figure out what their interests are, or their skill sets. But we're also working directly with the employers. You know, pre-pandemic, we were working with and even during the pandemic, we're working with over 3,000 employers a year. That's a lot of information that we get from those employers. There's a lot of labor trends that are happening on a regular basis. And so, you know, it's communicating, it's having good partners like Mary Ellen and others around this table. You know, we can't do the work alone. Partnerships are key, as mentioned earlier. You know, much like many that were mentioned today, Urban League does a fantastic job. Goodwill Industries, some of the others in that space nationally can be good partners. But there's also a lot of community-based and faith-based organizations that you have to partner with in order to get the information out and to make a really true difference in each of your communities. So thanks for that question, Andrea.
So I want to push on something that Jacob just said, that so much has changed. And I know that, and I want to pivot to Michelle, Edison, and then Melissa about kind of the role that you see vis-a-vis employers, right? So I think burning glass and MC data and labor market data is really important. It's an important part of the compendium, like how do we actually know our local labor market, but we also have to have conversations with employers. We also have to just talk and figure out not only what they need as far as jobs, but what do they need to understand about what young people need. So I'm wondering if I can just pivot first to Michelle, then Edison, then Melissa, to talk a little bit about kind of what those conversations with employers look like, feel like, sound like in this kind of new environment.
So I think we have this very unique position where United Way is we incubate a lot of initiatives, right? And so we incubated what's called Atlanta Career Rise, which is a funders collaborative. It's a workforce collaborative that really in greater Atlanta or metro Atlanta, we have 5 local workforce boards. So it's a lot, right, to rally around. Atlanta Career Rise really is the lead for those workforce boards and really getting them to work together and really think about how we serve youth and young adults differently, right? Another thing that Atlanta Career Rise has been really instrumental in as a part of the Career Ready ATL Youth Apprenticeship system is that they have what's called Metro Industry Partnerships. So we are aware that we want to focus on the high demand industries, which right now we're looking at IT, it's advanced manufacturing, it's TDL, transportation, distribution, logistics. But we have also been circling back to hospitality. So hospitality has become a new hot thing, right? It fell off for a while because of, we know all what happened in the pandemic, and now it's coming back. And so aligning with the current employers that they have that are participating in these industry partnership meetings, we really are learning directly from employers about what their needs are, the things that they need to change. They're not sure, you know, how to make those changes. Conversations are happening at that area or at those tables. And then what we're doing is having Atlanta Career Rise to really leverage that information to say, how do we inform what's happening with Career Ready ATL for our ecosystem? I would say that we also have had some individual conversations with companies like Apple and, you know, Google, some of our local employers that are doing logistics programs, and a lot of things that they're still struggling with. I think, especially when we talk about out of school youth, is where to find them. I think that's the magical question that everyone wants to know. If you're working with out of school youth, we have this program, but we have no idea how to recruit or where to find them. And so as I think about the work that I've been doing with Opportunity Youth since around 2016, it's like we still are looking for them. We know they exist, but it's still that question of, you know, looking for them. And so I think employers have really been saying that, you know, we have these positions, we really understand that the young adults may have the skill sets to fill them, but there's still some hesitation to support youth and young adults that are under 18. Lots of liabilities depending on the field that you're talking about, but we really are continuing to have those conversations with employers to help them kind of understand where the youth and young adults are coming from and really how we can meet in the middle. So I would just say for us, we really have leveraged the industry partnerships that our partner Atlanta Career Rise is leading to really kind of help us to understand where employers are and, you know, where do we need to kind of bend a little bit to in determining what's the best pathway for these youth and young adults. So I would say that's the one area that we've leveraged, one-on-one conversations with employers, but then these larger conversations as well. And we really are still like having them. So we haven't come to any final decisions, but what we do know is we do have a lot of employers that are interested in youth apprenticeships. It's just going to take more time and really providing a little bit more hand holding for them to feel secure in diving, right in.
Similarly, in Philadelphia, Michelle, I think that we have that sort of wide spectrum of experiences with employers, and sort of like the thing is, as we've done with apprenticeship PHL, is sort of figuring on the messaging and where do we get to the employers. So it's not just one venue that we get sort of the feedback and the connection to employers, but at both the sort of horizontal and the vertical approach. So that could be through, industry sponsor business associations, the commerce, the commerce department, for example, bringing in employers, the chambers of commerce, bringing employers together, industry partnerships. So we're looking at, like the health industry partnerships, say, what is going on in your entry level spaces where you can't find workers, and how might we think differently? The other thing, I'm going to sort of reflect back and overusing the word great resignation, but let's be honest what that means. It's also reflecting the rise of worker power. So that is a transformational thing, which that also means that employers are open to thinking differently and how they recruit, retain, and what cultural transformation needs to happen in the workplace to ensure not just all their employees to thrive, but young workers to thrive at work. So I think we have a really historical moment to sort of put that conversation around youth apprenticeships and that continuum of essentially what we're saying is it's intentional onboarding, providing the supports for somebody to thrive, grow, and become the qualified professional that would return to you 100 times through productivity. And so that conversation is actually happening in pockets, but it needs to be elevated at a national level. So we should be working locally, but collecting these centers of, I would say, growing excellence and saying, how does this elevate at a national level? How does it impact policy and funding to drive more of that business engagement? How do we also impact those policies that may create, quote unquote, the risk of taking chances on hiring young people? It's almost like we have banned the box for hiring young people. How do we eliminate that, that box? And so this is where critically building the infrastructure, and it's a complex infrastructure, where there might be a summer internship run by, in the case of Atlanta, I think United Way, in our case is by Philadelphia Youth Network. So, how might we use that to leverage building, not just a summer works ready program, but something more holistic that leads to youth apprenticeship through long-term employment? How might we look at urban education in general and say, what are the state alignments that allow what credit we give for work-based learning experiences? So these are the pieces also that it may impact and motivate our educational systems. But thinking about employers, we often think of employers as something external to us. I think that we also need to think of ourselves as employers. How do large school systems think about their need for growing their own talent and using these practices we talk about? And then how do youth servant agencies do the same? So in Philadelphia, we're focusing on building what we call a youth development practitioner apprenticeship, where we're looking at how can agencies that's led by PowerCore and 1199C, how do agencies that provide services to young adults can in turn hire them to inform our process and help them along their path of career pathway development that transforms how agencies serve young people, but also transforms how we understand that process so we can translate it for our employers.
You brought up so many really good points. I'm wondering, Melissa, if I can pivot to you a little bit, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about the relationship you have with your employers and how some of the relationships with employers and partners helps to clear some of the way to make youth apprenticeship a possibility.
Well, We are in a unique position because as a part of the technical college system in the state of South Carolina, our whole mission in life is workforce development, and we have a service region. And so we are constantly engaged with our employers to find out what their needs are, to build programs that help do the training for the citizens so that they can get those jobs to fill those critical workforce positions. We have advisory boards of employers for all of the programs who help to advise us as to what are the needs and what are the next steps. But additionally, we have a unit in the college. It's the Division of Apprenticeship and Employer Partnerships. And we have consultants, and they go out to meet with the employers and sit down and help them to assess their needs and talk about what we as a college can do to help them serve them. And of course, apprenticeship is always on the table, and lead them in that direction. But in addition to within the college itself, we have great partnerships with our Chamber of Commerce. And as Edison has already mentioned, you know, they convene groups regularly. They have convenings of HR directors and sit with them and talk to them about what type of issues they're facing. And so they invite us into those meetings so that we can gain information from them about how we can fill that gap. But the cool thing that they do, I got to tout our chamber on this one, love this. They do every 2 years a talent demand study. And they study the region, takes a look at where the jobs are and where the jobs are projected to be out 5 and 10 years in the future. And then it also looks at all of the education institutions within our area, K-12 and post-secondary, and how many graduates we are producing to actually fill those jobs. And it tells us where the gaps are. So it gives us an analysis of where there are going to be jobs without people in them. And so when we're looking at building these programs collaboratively as a region, we're looking at that talent demand study to really inform us as to what the needs are going to be and where those gaps are going to exist so that we can help those students really get into those areas of employment. Edison also mentioned becoming an employer. You know, in the very second year of the apprenticeship program, we realized if we were going to talk to employers about the beauty of apprenticeship program, we needed to become an employer. And so Trident Technical College started employing students in the youth apprenticeship program in the IT space. Now we have them in the IT space, and we also are hiring them in culinary because we run the food outlets. Our Culinary Institute's running the food outlets in the institution. So do look at yourself, become a model, and then you are better positioned to talk about the benefits of it, how to manage that, how to mentor that student when you are engaging with those employers out there. So does that answer your question, Andrea, or did you need something else from me?
No, I think it does. I think it does. And I want to push a little bit on this role of partnerships and the roles that they play. And I'm conscious of time, but I'm wondering if you can, each of you kind of briefly speak really quickly to kind of why partnership is such an important part of the ecosystem development. Like, who needs to be at the table and why? And I'm wondering, Jacob, if I can push to you a little bit, like for you, who needs to be at that table and why?
Yeah, from an apprenticeship standpoint, you know, I think the key partners at the beginning were the Department of Labor, their Office of Apprenticeship, and our state agency at the time was a different name, but today serves under Labor Force Economic and Opportunity, or Labor Economic and Opportunity. And so great partners to really help us identify, should we do apprenticeships? Can we be the intermediary or sponsor? Because at first they were telling us no, that we can't, even though our employers were pushing us. And then obviously it's partnerships with the employers. So making sure that you have strong partnerships with your employers. In this case, it was a consortium of employers. We had 3 of the largest hospitals. Pre-pandemic, we're hiring 150 people a day, and many, or maybe a week. Maybe a day seems a bit aggressive at this point, thinking of my talking points. But either way, they were hiring a lot of people, right? So large hospitals struggling to find talent. And then it is those, you know, those community-based partners, you know, I'm looking at Michelle at United Way, that oftentimes are funded by United Way, right? So they're the urban leagues and the Hispanic center for us in West Michigan, as well as many other community-based partners. So each of our counties is a little different as far as resources and partners within each of those areas. So partnerships look a little different, but we have to partner with all of them because there are needs, and then it takes more of a systemic approach, as Michelle was talking about. Then it lives far beyond just the life of one person and the relationships that one person established. Having a strong partnership with these organizations helps make it last a lot longer beyond just one person, because we, even in this space, even in the nonprofit space or the governmental or whatever you may consider yourself, we've seen even a lot of churn over the last 2 years, and so it's important to develop a more systemic approach around some of these partnerships.
Edison, can I pivot to you a little bit? I mean, from your position in Philadelphia, like, who needs to be at the table, and why do they need to be there?
So I think I'm going to piggyback on what Jacob said. If we're focusing on this youth apprenticeship, obviously it's industry and education. That to us is the big piece. And then everything else supports that alignment, whether that's the public workforce systems, the education systems in terms of CTE funding and other areas of funding, and the nonprofit sector. How might we provide the intermediate roles in supporting that, whether that's supportive services, managing the paperwork for the apprenticeship if it has to be registered and whatnot. But I think the critical piece is young people, the voice of young people, as well as the voice of the communities we aim to serve. The other thing that COVID has laid bare is that the disproportionate representation of people of color in entry level, very limited career pathway options. So we are used to doing things for young people, and I think Brent has said we need to have them be a partner and protagonist. So how might we be more inclusive at the table? Where do we find these voices that can drive this work? So I think that's a piece that we're reflecting, saying how do we ensure that that's happening? Especially because if we build this system, will it be used? And so there's a lot of this, one of our concerns is who's building it? Is that leadership representative of the communities that we're trying to serve? And in that respect, it's really important that we have that check and we ask ourselves, are all stakeholders, in the same belief and acknowledge that talent is deep among our young people, but opportunity is not. And my youth apprenticeships be that vehicle to respond to the opportunity and that challenge.
Michelle, can I ask you to respond to that a little bit too, from your perspective?
I would definitely agree with Edison and Jacob say that it's your employers, your industry partners, is definitely the school system, like he talked about, your CTAE director, but definitely at the state level. In youth, I think those are 3 or 4 critical partners that have to be a part or participating in the table in order for you to be successful. So he really honed in on a point that I think that has been really important to us. We're building this ecosystem, but it's not like this hasn't been done before and attempted. How do we know it's really going to last, and how do we know it's really going to be successful? And when we take a step back, we think about you've never built an ecosystem that's focused on a specific population for youth that is furthest from opportunity. And if you have the youth that is furthest from opportunity at your table, it has to be successful because we're listening to what they're saying and we're working to really figure out how to build it. And like Edison said, really thinking about it is population, but it's also a place focus. There are some places in Greater Atlanta that we need to dig into deeper than other places, right? And I think the youth really bring that perspective. So I would say employers, industry partners, the school system, and then of course, youth would be the key partners that I feel like should be at the table.
Marianne, can I ask you to respond to this too? Andreas earlier said something that young people have a lot to teach us. And I think particularly in the work that you're trying to do, young people are particularly positioned to respond to some of the nature of the climate change crisis and how we can build something that fits their needs as well as the needs of the organization you're trying to serve.
We have tried to kind of take a youth-centered approach toward thinking about the Civilian Climate Corps. And I think it appeals to a lot of young people like the Sunrise Movement and Evergreen, young people who are maybe college graduates and are very aware of climate change and how it impacts their lives and are interested in doing something on an advocacy level. I think we need to pay particular attention to those young people, like Michelle said, who are farthest from opportunity, who don't have the luxury of worrying about climate change and sea level rise and global warming. They are concerned about, how they're going to make rent and how they're going to support their family and finish their high school diploma. So for them, it's the goals, I think, and the ends are the same, but the conversation and the reason for engaging is different. So we have to think about how we make a civilian climate corps appealing and relevant to people all over sort of the socioeconomic spectrum, people from all different communities. We have been corps and service opportunities and the workforce in general have been struggling with recruitment. How do we need to change our messaging to reach people who have been left behind? It's not a big national campaign or getting on a website. It's word of mouth. And so we have to think about how we do things differently, and we have to completely get the input of the young people that we want to engage in what works best for them. Designing a program that we think works best is sort of destined to fail. So we have about 25,000 young people who go through a corps every year, and I know that they would be ready, willing, and very happy to participate in the conversation of what appeals to them and what their desires are. So to the extent that we have access to and we engage the young people and we listen to what they have to say, I think that is going to sort of determine how successful we are in this initiative.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to land, and I can continue this conversation for several more hours. But I want to thank each of you deeply for joining us and for sharing your insight and really getting us to think differently about the way that young people enter the world of work, the role that we play as bridge builders, and really honing in on the role that young people play in shaping the way that we change the approach to the nature of work and changing the workplace itself. And I think that we have a lot of learning to do and a lot of new insights to gain from them as part of this broader system. So I will transition this back over to my colleague Miriam, and thank you all very much for joining us.
We do have one question for Edison from the audience before I transition out. There was a question that came in about the Youth Development Practitioner apprenticeship. Has that been approved? I think there's some interest in the audience about that apprenticeship.
So we're in the process of actually the regional system here of youth practitioners giving feedback into building those standards, and where we believe in them being open source. We're working with the Urban Institute. Actually, I'm a participant, not an active member of that, but I can connect you to the folks that are directly working with that, and we would love to help you build that apprenticeship in your area.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Edison. Thanks to everyone in this panel. I know we can continue this conversation for hours, but thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Andrea, for leading this conversation. We are going into a 5-minute break, and grab a snack, grab some water, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes with programming. In the meantime, we'll play a video where you'll hear from our apprentices from all over the country about why they apprentice. Thank you so much, everyone.
My name is Rachel Witt. I've been an apprentice for a year and a half, and I'm an 043 maintenance electrician. We build aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines for the Navy. That's our customer. My mom was a single mom of 3, and she couldn't afford to send us all to college. I've always wanted to learn a trade. I've always wanted to be an electrician. My family's been electricians for generations, and I can't wait to follow in their footsteps. I've never been a college person, but the Apprentice School offers a chance to go to an advanced course where you can get a bachelor degree. Once I've learned my trade, I became brave enough to follow in a college career. You know, be brave. It's a scary thing to come into the yard with people who have been working in their trades for years and you don't know much about it, but you learn so quickly and it's not scary once you understand. We're all here for one purpose, is to learn our trade and build good ships.
I'm Noah Mueller. I started working here at Optimex about 3 years ago for an internship and started my apprenticeship in December of 2019. I wanted to go into an apprenticeship program because I decided that the normal college route that everybody else took wasn't the right route for me. What I've learned since I've started my apprenticeship is that learning things in the workplace is wildly different than how you learn anything at school. Everything is right in front of your eyes. Since starting here, I've grown in my social ability, being able to talk to my coworkers, as well as learning hands-on. The benefits of working in this apprenticeship program is that Optimex pays for my whole college tuition, parking, and books. Most people don't realize that there's other alternatives to the generic college path, and going into apprenticeship is a great way to get a head start.
I'm Jordan Wilson, and I'm an X33 coding specialist at the Apprentice School, and I've been here for a year and 4 months. We do a lot of taking paint off and painting parts of the ship. We build world-class submarines and carriers. We focus on quality. I'm 19 years old, so I think I'm pretty stable and able to do a lot of things that I like to do. We make good money here. The Apprentice School is tuition free, so you still be able to get your degree here, and you'll have a job with the company if you choose to stay here, so you'll be secured. The Apprentice School has changed me as a person because it's brought out the leadership skills that I know that were already in me, because that's what we focus on here. We focus on leadership, craftsmanship, and scholarship. I'm capable of doing a lot of things, and being an apprentice really shows how to bring that out of you. So that's my favorite part, is testing what I'm capable of doing, even if I don't know it.
My name is Javon Walker. I've been an electrician apprentice for about a year and a half now. My favorite part about being an apprentice is I actually get to hook up boxes and hook up switches and troubleshoot systems, and I actually get to learn the stuff in the classroom that I can eventually be a licensed electrician. If I were to graduate today, I would be making about $30 an hour. For me, I could be a Tesla electrician. I could just be an electrician that works on motors. I can be an electrician that works on switchboards. It all matters. It gives you the opportunity to do what you actually want to do. For being a young man, for me, I became very responsible, waking up early. I never miss a day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our National Apprenticeship Week event here at JFF. We've had some great conversations today. In the last discussion, we had a panel, a panel of heavy hitters talk about what's happening in their local areas, all about partnerships. And how they've developed partnerships, and the folks in that panel were at different levels of the continuum, where we had folks that were really experiencing and building out apprenticeship ecosystems for young people, and others that were newer. So I'm still energized and really excited to continue the conversation, and it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jonathan Payne, a senior program manager at JFF, who will lead a conversation. If you've noticed, we've been narrowing, right? He'll illustrate how this can happen in a particular region. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jonathan. Jonathan?
Hi, Miriam. Thanks a lot. It's great to be here. My name is Jonathan Payne. I am a senior program manager at JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And I'm really, as I said, I'm excited to be here today. We've heard throughout the session, as we've narrowed, right, about the federal push to build and promote youth apprenticeship. We've heard about how JFF is working to meet the moment to build more diverse and inclusive talent pipelines for in-school and out-of-school youth, to ultimately build a more equitable economic recovery as we hope to come out of this pandemic. We've heard from community colleges, from community-based organizations, from workforce boards about how they built and developed and supported youth apprenticeship programs. And I think over the conversations that we've heard, one of the major recurring themes really is partnership. Youth apprentices require support. Youth apprenticeships require coordination, and those require partnerships. Partnerships which don't just happen and which don't just happen in a vacuum. They're cultivated over time. They're driven by need, and they're cultivated by that shared responsibility, which is essential for success. So I'm excited today to be joined by some of our friends and partners from Delaware to show and really illustrate, to get really grainy about how they've cultivated their partnerships over time. I want to turn to our partners there. And I think I'll start, Luke, I'm going to start with you. So I'd love to turn to each one of you and have you introduce yourself, give us your name and your organization and what your organization, the function your organization serves within your system.
Sure. So good afternoon. My name is Luke Ryan. I'm the Director for Career and Technical Education with the Delaware Department of Education. The way that I describe our work is we have three particular lines of business. The first is really around our middle grades programming, which is focused on student identity development and day one readiness for high school. Our kind of 9 to 12 program is focused principally around our career pathway system. So the majority of youth in high school in Delaware are part of a career pathway program. We have some great partners today that support that work directly. And we also provide service to our post-secondary system. So really principally focusing on short and long-term credential programs, support for our registered apprenticeship system, and then support for our statewide community and technical college system. In terms of roles, I think we play two. So the first is we're obviously a state agency. So we're a systems agent. We develop accountability models, we develop fiscal structures, we develop both regulatory and legislative policy. We also support the executive branch, the governor's office in our state. The other role that we play is we do kind of quasi-play the role of an intermediary, where we do work to coordinate resources, whether they're philanthropic or private or federal or state, and really work to create systems that support young people and adult learners. And I have the absolute pleasure to work with the three additional folks who are joining us on today's call, who are just both unique and exemplary in their own way. And I'll let Jonathan, I'll let you turn it over to them.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it. Colleen, let's go to you.
My name is Colleen Conity. I'm the supervisor of career and technical education for the Newcastle County Vocational Technical School District. Newcastle County VOTEC is a comprehensive VOTEC school district serving 4,691 students across 4 high schools in our county, Newcastle County in northern Delaware. We also have the privilege to have an adult education division, which is an immediate feeder for our successful graduates once they complete their career pathways at the secondary level. So I'm very excited to join you today in this conversation, and thanks for including me.
Absolutely glad you could make it, Colleen. Thank you. Ruth Ann.
Hello, I am Ruth Ann Messick. I am with the Delaware Restaurant Association Educational Foundation, and we are looking to connect the youth through opportunity of apprenticeship and education into our industry, whether they are in high schools or with a ProStart system, or are they a part of a CBO, a community-based organization with a restaurant-ready partner. So us as the state industry, I guess, professionals there, we have the means to be able to connect the youth to our partners, to our restaurant partners, so they can get into the field that they are looking at and studying to do.
Thank you.
Yes, that leaves me,
Thank you,
John.
Ruth Ann. It does leave you, Patrick. You're up.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Patrick Callahan. I represent Tech Impact. We are a nonprofit organization, and we really focus in a couple different areas of work. One is around capacity building, which is not terribly relevant to this conversation, and the second one is around workforce development. And so I guess in that way, we play a couple different roles. One as a training provider. So we have our own program that we run here in Delaware called IT Works, which is for young people 18 to 26, so generally disconnected from school and work, training them in IT skills, so skill set for IT infrastructure. And then also we play a role as an intermediary, where we have larger contracts with the state and federal government to manage workforce development investments for training folks in jobs in IT. And so along those lines, we feel apprenticeship is a really great tool to help develop a tech talent pipeline here in Delaware that meets the needs of the employers and adds diversity to the talent.
Awesome. Thank you. So thank you all for being here. Luke, I think I want to kick off with you and have you sort of describe the ecosystem as it exists today in Delaware.
Sure. So we'll start on the K-12 side and we'll move through our post-secondary and adult system. So a couple quick talking points. So it is the majority of youth in high school who are enrolled in kind of an advanced career pathway. So these career pathways provide early college and early career experiences. And it's actually slightly over 70% of all young people in grades 9 through 12 are enrolled in a career pathway program. That is across our technical schools, our comprehensive school districts, and our charter school system. So in general, our public education system. Our work then, right now, is, so I guess jump back to our post-secondary system. We have a statewide community college system, Delaware Technical Community College, that offers credential as well as 2-year and 4-year degree programs. They serve residents statewide. They also run pre-apprenticeship programs and other types of readiness models that exist. We also have an adult technical centers. So Colleen mentioned this previously. Each of our 3 regional vocational school districts is both a secondary institution as well as a post-secondary institution. So on the post-secondary side of Newcastle County VOTEC, they run both credential programs, again, short and long-term credential programs, but they run the overwhelming majority of related training and instruction for the state's Registered Apprenticeship program. So they are both, by their very nature, our technical school systems are both secondary and post-secondary systems in and of themselves, so serving both youth and adults simultaneously. And then what I think is really unique is we have just a robust relationship with employer associations and other community and nonprofit providers. So to Ruth Ann's comments, our employer associations are very much at the center of system design and how we collectively lead talent strategies. So employer associations, again, focus on employer memberships, supports to employers, growth within the industry, as well as ways in which we can consolidate and think about talent strategies that can exist at scale across similar types of employers and similar types of occupations. So Ruth Ann will talk, she's incredibly entrepreneurial, as is the organization, in terms of how they evolve and continue to grow the hospitality sector in the state of Delaware. But to Patrick's comments, our community base and how we support kind of nonprofits I think is also incredibly important. So ways in which we can introduce innovation in the system, ways in which we can produce training that exists between the community and an employer directly. And then as Patrick mentioned, he also serves as kind of a convener of employers. So really making sure that we can garner, where there are not employer associations, a level of systems intelligence and systems design that allows kind of employer knowledge, employer guided practice to kind of proliferate across system actors, local education agencies, post-secondary institutions, and then our traditional employer association model.
So that was quite a bit. There's a lot to unpack there. And that's actually sort of what I want to get to, right? So here we are today. And I work with, I have the pleasure of working with you all through the Youth Apprenticeship Readiness Grant as we work to build out those youth apprenticeship pathways and construction in hospitality and in IT, and really work to connect like CTE programs on through to registered apprenticeship programs. And so we've got there now today, but let's take a step back, right? So 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs become extinct. And then 10 years ago, I think 10 years or so ago, Delaware engages in the Pathways to Prosperity work and starts building the some of these programs. So I think what I want to do is say, how did this all start? What was the first conversation? And that is open. This is an unrehearsed also, just like the last panel, this is an unrehearsed open response conversation about how these relationships, these partnerships came to be. So Colleen, I think, let's go.
Sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I can speak a little bit to the historical perspective. I think my school district has been doing this type of work for over 50 years. We started out not as comprehensive high schools, but as county career centers in a part-day model. When our school system shifted to become comprehensive high schools, by which students attend and receive the high school diploma and participate in their career programs and earn their career credentials, that was in the late 70s. So our 4 high schools really enjoy rich and robust relationships with business and communities, the community that they serve in Newcastle County. Many of our associations are built on relationships who are, at the core of our partnerships. In some cases, these people are graduates who have built successful businesses by continuing to hire successful graduates. In other cases, many of them supply us with employees who become instructors who teach in our day and our night programs. The instructors from the workforce have formed trusting relationships in the careers that they previously built before they became instructors in our programs. Their associations might be community members, might be community-based organizations to which they belong to. They might be mutual customers, association members that are affiliated through professional associations, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, nonprofits. Everyone works, right? So everyone's a member of some kind of affiliated group of some kind, and we have always looked to leverage shared experiences. Our partners, some of which are alumni, or closely affiliated with our programs and the people who, are the backbone of our programs. They serve on real advisory boards for our career programs. The advisory boards really meet, and we include the feedback from the advisory boards in the refinement revision of our curriculum and our program offerings, and we seek to improve them constantly. We work to stay current and relevant and on pace with industry trends and market demands. And then when things get difficult, we revisit and lean on these types of relationships to weather when the seemingly unsustainable volatility happens, like we've all seen for the past year or so. When inflation hits, our employer partners and industry associations respond with donations, supplies, materials, tools, equipment, support for our students. They offer support for credentialing costs, curriculum costs, or tools, uniforms, and boots. But they also really support us by hiring these kids, by taking a really risk-taking approach to bringing on a youth into their workforce and mentoring them through a process that takes them from a child student to an adult apprentice in most cases. I know that was kind of long-winded, but we just have the benefit of history, and when you do, you can rely on the relationships that you've built, which, like all successful relationships, take time and attention to nurture and sustain and develop.
So what I'm hearing is that you've taken time, that because that time has passed, because you've been able to cultivate those relationships, they've been founded on successes, early successes. I think I'd like to pivot to Ruth Ann to talk about, because that's really about, Colleen, you spoke about how really those young people became industry professionals, and then they circled back to then re-engage with the education system. Ruth Ann, I'd love to pivot to you to say, like, how does that work on the employer side of the of the apprenticeship relationship?
Well, with the Delaware Restaurant Association, with us being that employer association, we have the many decades relationship with all of the restaurants here in the state. Something a little newer to us within the past 5-10 years is the ProStart, where we are overseeing here at the Delaware Restaurant Association Educational Foundation, the ProStart programs, which is the culinary instruction in the schools. So with us having the connections, the long-term connections with all of our employer members, and now we've built the connections with our ProStart, our industry instruction in the schools. We kind of are that cross bridge, that crossover bridge, where we can connect those who are choosing this as their industry. They want this as their career. They aren't looking for a paycheck. They want this as their career. So we can connect them with those employers that we have the long time relationships with. And with apprenticeship coming on board, even newer to us is we are connecting with a lot of community-based organizations that have a culinary program. And through the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation, we are able to offer them a curriculum called Restaurant Ready, where it gets them ready for a career within this. So we have the many different avenues that is out there with the young people who want this as their career, and they can come to us and we can connect them with our employer partners.
Thank you so much. It's really great. You mentioned community-based organizations, and Patrick, I realized that, we're sort of talking about the restaurant association versus the IT side of the house, but I'm wondering if you can share sort of how your roles or your role as a community-based organization within this system is similar and or maybe different from the role that the CBOs that Ruth Ann works with are.
Yeah, sure. So I think, when it comes to apprenticeships, we sort of backed into this, right? Like, I think, we're a workforce development organization. We're working with youth that were, had maybe either left high school early, went back, got their GED, or graduated high school, but then didn't go to college, or maybe went to college, but found it wasn't for them. So we're really talking about alternative pathways, right? And for us, we were working with those youth to train them for jobs that were in demand, technology jobs, and that were sustainable wages. And, we also had a real focus on diversity. So I think, our goals were just that: reach more youth, bring more diversity to technology, and provide alternative pathways, right, to careers. And so in our work, what we found is we needed to create a lot of relationships with employers, right? Because it takes educating employers that, particularly, in fields like engineering, IT, and things like that, that, you can have a really smart young person that didn't graduate college, right? So where the employers were super focused on, college recruitment, we had to try to, educate them that there are alternative pathways and those, and get their buy-in to that. And I think, so for me in that, what I found was this apprenticeship model lends a lot of credibility to an alternative pathway, right? Because there's the whole RTI process of related training instruction, there's on-the-job training, there's a long period of time where you get familiar with the apprentice, and the apprentice gets familiar with the company. So for me, I looked at this and I said, this is a really good model. And then I kind of sought out people that were leading, this type of work, like Luke and others in our state, and the pathways. And so I really just see ourselves as part of that ecosystem. And I'm, and another way to help promote, these youth into these jobs. Now, of course, I'm seeing that in a larger scale because, we work with organizations like Apprentice. In fact, we are an Apprentice franchise, for helping to place people into jobs, IT jobs, as an alternative pathway here in Delaware and elsewhere. And so I just really see ourselves as part of a larger system that is really trying to solve for the same issues. And in that, we just happen to be organized as a nonprofit organization, which is a great position to be in because our first, orientation is towards mission, right? We're about mission, and part of our mission is getting more folks, employed. So it works really, really well. But I can't say, that we went out and consciously made that decision to, hey, we're going to just start apprenticeships, IT apprenticeships. But it's turned out to be a really good thing. And I think, we're just at the beginning of that. And we're learning how we interface with these other organizations, education organizations. And so there's still a lot to come, but we're excited about where we are.
Was there a moment, Patrick, where where you all of a sudden said, "Oh, we need to go down that road, where we need to get involved in those tech apprenticeships"?
There was, Jonathan. I don't remember the exact moment.
Date and time.
Somewhere between 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs went extinct and now, no, but much closer to now. No, I think, I was starting to see trends, and I think in our work we see trends, and a lot of, the work Apprentice was doing was becoming evident because some of the funding streams from the federal government were starting to move toward apprenticeship. So it was kind of like, well, we better learn what this is all about, and we better understand this. And of course, we knew it intuitively from the trades, and we've seen how it works for the trades and can really benefit and change someone's life in a very, very positive way. So this is just another twist on that, right? You're sort of taking these modern jobs like IT and fitting it into that model. But everything I'm seeing, it just works really well. And when I saw the traction that Apprentice, I think, was getting on the West Coast, I was like, wow, we need to learn more. And so I would say that moment was probably, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, somewhere in that time frame.
Yeah, I think that it's such an interesting idea to just be able to, I think, be positioned as a system to meet that moment. Luke, I want to circle back to one of the things that you said, and I want to make sure that I clarify this point. You said that the majority of youth in Delaware are enrolled in a career development experience in their senior year, or sorry, in high school rather. And I think you said 65%. And so I want to, one, say, did I hear you correctly? And two, how did you get to that point? And I think, Colleen, you're going to, I'm going to definitely want to hear from you on that question as well. So Luke, I'll start with you to make sure that I framed that correctly, and then we'll pivot to Colleen after that.
So I think, generally speaking, in order to meet the economy of scale that's necessary, just every actor across the table needs to be similarly positioned, similarly empowered, and we all need to have a shared North Star. And that shared North Star is essentially we need to meet employers where they are, and our goal is to build experiential opportunities for young people. And by doing so, we are going to improve communities. That's it, right? Like our ability to triangulate community, employer, and student, whether that's an adult or a youth, right? That is kind of our shared North Star. And I don't care if you're a nonprofit that we partner with, a state agency that we partner with, a local education agency, our employer association, that is our collective goal. It is really around producing talent at an economy of scale that meets employers' needs more than anything else. So that is really kind of the philosophy of the state's career pathway system. Every individual in our K-12 system will move into a family sustaining career. And we would love to keep as many of those folks within the Delaware labor market as we absolutely can. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we create systems that empower young people, help young people to build identities, and really make it easier, essentially, for young people to transition beyond high school into a good job. That's it. In terms of our career pathway program, it is about trying to meet the young person where they are. So whether we work with the charter school or a comprehensive school or our partner with Colleen, we have rich career pathway programs that are a little different in each of those institutions, but they principally drive towards the same outcome, which is student transition into higher levels of education and entrance into the workforce. So we're trying to simultaneously prepare the young person to upskill and enter the labor market. And in terms of numbers, we work with all but 2 high schools across the state. So it's like 98% of all high schools are part of this career pathway model. And then it's a little over 70% of youth in grades 9 through 12. It's actually about 65% of youth in grade 12 who complete a career pathway program. And then what we're essentially finding is that the majority of young people are choosing to continue their education, meaning they're transitioning from a pre-apprenticeship program into a registered apprenticeship program. They're transitioning from a high quality career pathway program into a 2-year, 4-year degree program or a credential program. But what's also incredibly important is more young people than ever are choosing to simultaneously work while pursuing higher education. And that is essentially, in my opinion, where apprenticeship can meet young people, right? If more young people are choosing to simultaneously work and pursue higher ed, that is really the core component of an apprenticeship model. And I think, we have the opportunity to evolve our system in a way that's both responsive to employers and simultaneously is reflective of what activities and what young people are choosing to do when they transition beyond, our K-12 system.
So I love the idea of apprenticeship as an opportunity for that post-secondary work and earn and learn opportunity. Colleen, I want to pivot to you and ask how we drive that down into how you have started to and are working on driving that down into the K-12, into that K-12 space.
Yeah, so fortunately, with Luke's reference, we're very lucky that 100% of our graduates earn a high school diploma and a career area certificate. And we are fortunate to enjoy a 95% graduation rate. Over 80% of our graduates have earned industry recognized credentials or certifications, dual enrollment or articulated college credits, and or advanced placement into a variety of post-secondary experiences. In addition, over 80% of our seniors participate in paid career-related cooperative employment in that traditional earn while you learn model. And this is where the seeds of apprenticeship opportunities are sown. And they have a chance to incubate while the student is still in high school. And particularly, we see this in the trades programs traditionally. And as the co-oping seniors approach graduation for us, they receive opportunities to continue in the workforce, becoming either registered apprentices sponsored by their employers and heading into our adult division education programs where they've already received a year of advanced placement under their belt earned from their successful completion of the first level of the apprenticeship curriculum during their high school experience. They're paid employees during the day. Like Luke referenced, they're earning a paycheck and on-the-job clock hours toward their journeyman papers, and they're students at night, sponsored by their employers at little or no cost to them. More recently, we're working to incorporate and expand this traditional apprenticeship model into less traditional arenas. One, taking it from an 18-year-old participant down to a 16-year-old youth apprentice, and from the trades industries where it's been traditionally, recognized and popular, to IT and culinary arts, for example. Our model meets students where they are too, and it makes us more accountable to our participants. By accountable, I don't mean academically accountable. Our students start with their initial application during their comprehensive career exploratory experience and the selection process, and the earned outcomes that they make during their high school years allow them to enter the workforce full-time with in-demand and stackable credentials, as Luke says, or allow them to work with wage elevated by that credential that they've earned while they pursue their post-secondary goals, or enter college full-time with advanced placement and earn credits toward a self-selected program of study, which saves them both time and expense related to seat time in school. But when I talk about accountability for us, we're looking to expand the conversation beyond that academically talented kid that we do pretty well with, students who tend to excel academically in their post-secondary, aspirations. But really, we're able with our model to look more carefully and support every kid through a successful transition to adulthood, right? So not just the academically talented kid, we support them too, of course, but the squiggly kid, the challenged kid, the kid who can count their advantages on one finger of one hand, and that finger is resilience. So we know what the list of the barriers are, but I feel like our accountability as a school system lands on the last stop before the kids get off the bus and step right into the street, and the street being, literally the real world. And we in schools and school systems and school programs and school people who make it all happen, to get them to this point is keeping us accountable.
There are so many questions and so many directions that we could take this conversation. I think that one of the things that I heard you say, Colleen, is that you're meeting young people where they are. And earlier I heard, I think, I'm not sure who said it, but somebody said that they're also meeting employers where they are and the need that employers have. And so, Ruth Ann, I want to actually pivot to you to ask how you essentially can take that and what sort of support services and wraparound services in general that you're providing to help meet young people where they are and employers where they are and bridge the divide that sometimes exists between the two. And if anybody else has anything else to chime in on these, feel free to like unmute yourself and raise your hand or whatever.
So with our workforce development program here at the DRAEF, which is new to our program, we're into our second year with our workforce development. we recognize that to be successful, it's not just the good grades or it's not just the good skill. You have to have success in life as a whole person. There's more to being successful than getting the orders right or getting the good grades. So in order to play our part in helping those youth become successful, if they're coming from a community-based organization, most of the community-based organizations we've partnered with have case managers, and they provide a year's worth of wraparound services. They have outreach throughout the whole state to tackle any barrier that they may need. Bringing on our workforce development, we have brought on that role to the DRAEF. We are now that supportive service, that barrier reduction referral service for anybody in our youth apprenticeship. So if an employer has one of our apprentices and that person needs some help, whether it's with transportation, food insecurity, to name a few off the top of my head, if they let their employer know or if they let us know directly, we have the whole region of resources that we will direct them to. We don't provide the direct service, but we will refer them to the service closest to them. We also look at their geographical location to make sure that I'm not referring them somebody in northern Delaware to something that's only gonna provide a service in southern. So we network with throughout the community. We want to have as many barrier reduction services in our basket as possible. So if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I need diapers for my children, we have a diaper bank we can send them to. If they are, if they don't already have that case manager, we want to be able to provide that place where they can come comfortably, non-judgmental, and look, I need this help. Here it is. This is what's going to help you to succeed and be that whole person. This is what we want to do.
And I just have to, capitalize on what Ruth Ann said, because the level of support that they offer really enables us as a school system to focus on what we do best. And as long as we have assistance with some of those barrier reduction services that she claimed, it allows us to serve the student better and not to deny a student an opportunity that would otherwise be denied by some of those, those barriers that would be hard for the student on their own or without the privilege of that kind of service to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. The workforce feels like it's on our side in these efforts, and as long as they're aware of what we're doing and that we can develop, establish, and maintain the relationship between us that serves the students and their families.
Because Colleen and the educators, they are doing what they do best, and that is, providing that skill and that education. And then we're there as kind of that supportive service to provide other avenues that they may need.
And so I think that avenue could be the difference between a student having the resources to obtain the credential or not. Some of our, credentialing expenses are, over $100 an assessment, and to be able to provide some support for a student who can't enter the workforce to earn that money until they receive the credential qualifying them for it, it could be a game changer. So it just opens up so much more opportunity and connecting the student to the opportunity. The work that the Delaware Restaurant Association does to mine opportunities with big name and big ticket employers that might be hard for us as an education system to reach, to serve our students. That work has been done for us, and the Restaurant Association connects us with viable employers who have that need. And as long as we're doing our job and preparing the students, we have an endless supply of students that are qualified to meet that employment need. So
And then
Definitely.
And I think one of the interesting pieces there that you just landed on is the idea that and we've heard in previous conversations today about the importance of intermediaries as a glue, right, to hold systems together. And it is almost like, and Patrick, I'm going to turn to you next. But it is almost like, you know, as an example, the Delaware Restaurant Association is really focusing on, or is the intermediary that that is serving the employer side of the house, and that Colleen, the NCC, the Newcastle County VOTEC, is serving the education side of that population, right? Patrick, I'm wondering, because I don't want you know, the Delaware Restaurant Association to steal all of the thunder on this. I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to talk about, because earlier you mentioned that your work was on, you know, was in building out alternative pathways and focusing on diversity and how you can broaden access to opportunities through technology. And so I want to just sort of give you an opportunity to say, like, what sort of wraparound services and supports have been built into that, and how you're using those to leverage both you know, building partnerships with education and with employers.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a great question. I think we saw an opportunity to get engaged as an intermediary, and I think, you know, when I think about that, it's like, why would we do that, and what's the benefit, right? And when we thought about it, you know, we kind of looked at ourselves and we said, well, what are we really good at? We're really good at finding young people who need an opportunity, right? We're good at placing people because we have a lot of employer relationships. So when they finish training, we're good at placing them. Our program incorporates a lot of soft skills, and we're good at delivering those soft skills, especially through volunteers, and volunteers love working on those kinds of things. So when we looked at that, we said, okay, if we take ourselves out of this and move ourselves above this program that we have called IT Works, which is training people for basically help desk jobs, we said, really, we could reach so many more people, but we can't do it all ourselves either, because we can't be proficient trainers in every area of IT, right? There's so many different areas. I mean, you can just say something like cybersecurity, and there's probably 12 different jobs in cybersecurity, because we can't be everything to everyone, but we know the pieces that we were good at. So we kind of created this system, if you will, and we created it in a model that was sort of like a B2C almost, and we leveraged a program that had come out under the Obama administration called Tech Hire. And so we used that as sort of our mantra, and we created this website called Tech Hire Delaware, which essentially allows us to go out and market to the consumer base. So to find these people, young people, or people who are interested in changing jobs or changing careers, where they may have an interest in technology, kind of gets them to go to a central location, fill out a short form, and then we have admissions people who kind of call and reach out and find out where they are, what are they doing, what's their background, where do they want to go. And then we work with partners, you know, many different employment training partners in IT to align these folks to the programs, and then kind of like in that case manager role, kind of help manage them through that training process, bring in some volunteers, bring in some soft skills, and then at the end, as they complete their programs, align them to employers that are looking for those skill sets. So that's how we think of ourselves as an intermediary. So in that way, we were able to go out and develop proposals for large, you know, federal grants and attract those to the state, and then be able. So, like, you know, over the next 3 years, we're going to be training 700 people in Delaware for jobs in IT, with a focus on diversity. Right, more than 50% of the people we're serving are going to be from diverse populations. And when I say diverse, you know, it's people that are underrepresented in technology. So that can be women, that can be Blacks, it can be Latinx. You know, our population centers here, when you look at our population centers of those 3 areas I just mentioned, they're highly underrepresented in technology. Well, that's an opportunity for our state to take that talent and turn it into more talent, to help the employers in the state build the pools of talent that they need and hopefully attract new business to the state. But yeah, I think it's basically just we took a step back and said, what are we good at? How can we help promote more good in the state? And again, we're coming at it from a mission orientation, so that helps a lot too.
Patrick, you have given me a nearly seamless segue into the next question, which, Luke, I'm going to look to you and say, with essentially maybe 8 minutes or so left, I want to start talking about what's happening in the future, right? So, Patrick, we know what you're up to for the next 3 years. What else? What's the plan for Delaware, Luke? Where are you planning? Where is the system planning on going? What is the next thing that needs to be developed, or what are the partnerships that need to be cultivated?
Sure. So there are really 3 areas of focus as we evolve. The first is really around middle grades. The second is our more permeable post-secondary system. And then the third is employer engagement at scale. Or really employer positioning, deliberately and at scale. So in terms of middle grades, what we've really learned is that not every young person enters high school prepared for a rigorous career pathway. Not every student knows who they are within the context of their community or a potential occupation. And these are very rigorous experiences that we're kind of expecting young people to migrate into and be successful in. So there's a level of academic and technical preparation in addition to having a strong sense of who the individual is, and then celebrating that individual's culture and identity within the context of an occupation. So in terms of our middle grades evolution, it really is around student identity development, helping the young person to recognize their skills, their assets, their gifts, that those, their dispositions, who they are, they have value in the system. And they have value as an occupational identity evolves. So quite a bit of work here. The second area is really around our post-secondary system. So registered apprenticeship and earn and learn models are truly innovative. They're incredibly long historical practice, but incredibly innovative in how we think about traditional higher education and ways in which we can evolve seamlessly. So our work in this space is really around a number of buckets, but the big one is essentially credit for prior learning. So we want to ensure that all credentials, all degrees have value within the higher education system, both for clock hours and credit hours. So essentially learning becomes cumulative. And that includes the registered apprenticeship system. So ways in which credential programs can act as a bridge to registered apprenticeship, ways in which registered apprenticeship can be extended into traditional degree programs, or vice versa, ways in which an individual can complete an associate's degree and then specialize in an apprenticeship program, right? Much more system permeability, but recognizing and that system then being predicated on the value associated with credentials and, again, degrees. But in terms of our adult learners, we also want to recognize work experience. So as Colleen mentioned, in our registered apprenticeship system, adults can actually test out of, youth can actually test out of the first and second year of the registered apprenticeship program based on their prior work experience and their competence within that occupation or within a given set of skills. So again, we want to recognize that youth and adults bring a lot to the table. We have to kind of meet them where they are in terms of their curated educational path. And that we can build systems that create and promote that acceleration and matriculation. So that's on the post-secondary side. The third area is really this idea of employer centralization and prominence. And I think with kind of Ruth Ann and with Patrick specifically, we have to build systems around where employers are currently convening. We cannot expect employers to do, one-offs. We cannot expect, to host a, breakfast and everybody shows up. We essentially need to meet people where they already are. And that's in chambers, that's with associations, that's with employer intermediaries like Patrick's, and that's with partners like Colleen, who already have deep and embedded relationships with employers. We need to capitalize on what already exists and then create kind of a bigger net in which to kind of recruit and centralize in a way that's both conducive for employers, but also in a way that's easy for employers to kind of steer the ship and access different component parts of our education and training system. So I think, really, again, those three areas, right? Every student ready for high school and this rigorous kind of college and career pathway, really understanding where, how we can promote post-secondary options for adults as well as youth who are matriculating into that system. And then again, really focusing on kind of our employer positioning, to Patrick's point, both as an economic development agenda, but also to squarely lead kind of system iteration and how we choose to innovate.
I think I want to turn, Colleen, to you to talk about the beginning of that pipeline and how young people can essentially, how you start bringing young people into your secondary opportunities, really how you're building the on-ramps into your CTE programs that feed into the rest of that funnel.
Yeah, and first I look at what the off-ramp looks like. So what am I trying to, what's the outcome that I want? A student, where are they going from my experience, and how do we help them get ready for it? How do we define ready? So is the student equipped? Are they certified? Are they working? Are they employable, marketable, reliable, skilled? And are they a few steps up in their connection to an opportunity for growth? So circling back to through a 12th grade experience, an 11th grade experience, a 10th grade, looking at a ninth grader who's coming in very green. I don't know how many 14-year-olds know what they want to do with the rest of their life, but we can help them, identify and build their sense of individuality and their occupational identity. I like how Luke referred to it as their occupational identity, by helping them to explore and by equipping them with information about what opportunities are available to them out there. So we utilize the older student experience as a model for what they themselves will be able to experience. And by showing them that, and by developing them, as a student ready to enter the workforce, we show them what opportunities are available. A lot of our students come to us with a request to do something that's familiar. Somebody in their family does it. So they might want to get into a health career because they have somebody who's affiliated with that, but they might not know what building automation systems are, and if they'd be interested in that, or what's the difference between somebody who's interested in a legal administrative assisting career and a legal support services career, or what's the difference between a medical assistant and a certified nurse assistant. So by showing students and by developing them and by bringing them along in sort of a multi-tiered, multi-aged environment. So these career programs are places where instructors have created these learning environments that closely mimic the real world. And they have relationships with students at a really pivotal developmental portion of their lives for 3.5 years. So as long as the student is willing to commit to a career program of study, and we help them make that decision all through their 9th grade year through kind of a robust exploratory experience where they get to see all the career programs that are offered at their chosen school, then we help them we articulate the plan that they'll need to follow moving forward, and we try to motivate and inspire them to follow the path and follow the plan, and help them along the way get to the end goal.
I think that is like perfect. But those young people have to have, right? We have to have an outlet for all of those young people, right? We have to have careers for them to go into. We have to have employers that we can engage, whether it is in a career track that they're familiar with, sort of the one that they know, or it's a career track that they are unfamiliar with and that they learned through exploration. And so I want to turn to Ruth Ann for something. I'm trying to manage our time here, so I can make sure everybody gets their final words in. But Ruth Ann, I want to give you like a minute or two, and then Patrick, I want to turn to you to think about like the alternative pathways, like when young people say, "Oh, I don't actually want to do that. I want to do this instead that I never heard of." So Ruth Ann, you're up first.
So our kind of next steps we've already started a little earlier this week. Is connectivity events. Yes, we need to connect these young people going into apprenticeship with the employers, and most definitely we are working on that. We have been working on that. We provide different avenues. We have virtual platforms with career and resource expos, but something we all know what apprenticeship is here on this call. We are teaching those students what apprenticeship is, but those key people in the students' lives that may not know what apprenticeship is, and that student is going to continue to learn while they're in apprenticeship. And in a lot of cases, I know with the restaurant industry, they're going to earn national certifications. That is paid for. They're going to come out debt-free with these national certifications. Those that we have to educate on that are the parents. So we are having both virtual and come the new year, in-person events, so we can also educate the parents on apprenticeship, because that's where they live. That's who they hear. That's, you know, who's in their ear when they leave school and they leave their educator. So definitely reaching out and connecting with the parents, with those youth who are a major impact in their lives. We think is key. In addition to everything else we talked about, because we have to have the employers in those events, you know, we need to be able to connect them there. But to educate the parent and get them on board with apprenticeship is huge. And we've had our first parent information. It was a virtual evening, and we did it in the evening outside of regular hours so everyone could attend. We took into consideration after school events, sports. We were trying to take everything into consideration. And we're going to hold more virtual ones, and we're hosting our first in-person one in January after the holidays.
Thanks. Patrick, I'd love to give you a minute to talk about, and we've got a couple of questions that have come through I'm getting from chat, but I'd love to give you a minute to talk about how you're engaging IT employers for those young people to essentially have those occupations, and how you're doing that en masse.
Yeah, so, you know, we recognize that we didn't have a Delaware Restaurant Association for IT in Delaware. And so what we did is start one, you know, and we looked across the country at sort of best practices and said, where is this really effective? Where is this happening well? Washington State was one of those. Pittsburgh was one of those. Rhode Island's one of those. And we said, so if we're going to be good at this, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to find out where it's working well and build. And so we're in the process now of building an IT industry council. We've been doing this for the last year or so. You know, getting employers to the table, bringing these issues to the forefront, letting them know they need to engage in this process, the process of helping us understand where the requirements are for their requirements for new employees, and helping them understand the alternative pathways that are available to them to find these employees. So that's a beginning. You know, we've just been raising some money around that so that we can hire a team that's going to go out and build that from 30 employers to 130 to 230 employers, because that's what we think it's going to take, right? We think employers have to be at the table if any of this stuff works. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we're approaching it, you know, to try to get to some scale.
Thank you. So Luke, I'm going to pivot to you. We've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to give you the easier question, I think, first. People are asking how long this system has taken to create. So short answer.
Yeah, the short answer is we're building off the backs of giants. So as Colleen mentioned, career and technical education and the way that we think about training in the state, this is a 50-year adventure, right? But I would tell you outright from the youth apprenticeship model, we started very aggressive apprenticeship conversations and youth apprenticeship conversations probably about 5 years ago. And then we went through a couple learning environments that Pat had mentioned. Where do we have capacity? Where do we have partnerships? Where do we have partners that are employer facing? Where do we have the ability to grow and grow quickly? And it really, in the last, I'd say 2 years, has really just come to fruition, where there's a lot of people, parents, systems agents, education and training partners, community partners. They want to see a blurring of the line between our K-12 and higher education system. And frankly, they want to help young people move more aggressively into apprenticeship who were kind of simultaneously enrolled in high school. And we saw a lot of opportunity here in terms of how we think about our system development and how we think about kind of our K-12 system as a whole. So it's again, we're building off the backs of giants. But what's been wonderful really is in the last 5-6 years, that just everybody that we continue to talk to really is centered around kind of this, right? How do we meet youth? How do we meet employers? And then, right, how do we pull those things together?
So this is the last question that I get to ask you, Luke, which is, as you blur and blend those lines, as you create these pathways, and how are you making sure that young people are connecting to the pathways that they want to, that they're able to navigate these systems, that they're able to navigate and negotiate these blurred lines? And I'll give you the final word on that one. And again, to my panel, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I'll also thank our panel, Colleen, Pat, Ruth, and you guys are awesome. John, thanks for the opportunity. So this is a great, great question. And the big thing is be intentional about how you design your systems. This is not a one-size-fits-all environment, right? Different people have different needs, will make different decisions. And it's important. So when we think about our career pathway system, different institutions provide different types of training programs. Some have different durations, some have different focus areas of focus, some have different occupations, right? But the big thing is all of these things connect, right? So there are ways in which a person can kind of, choose their own adventure in order to get to the outcome. But we all know what the outcome is. The outcome is a good job in Delaware, right? So we just want to make sure that the person is able to walk whatever path they need to kind of find themselves and then find that placement. But again, you're not designing a one-size-fits-all. You have to design permeability into your system. And it's important that you talk to young people around, like, what are the types of paths that a person might walk, so that you're building from lived experience and you're able to design around kind of that lived experience.
Thank you so much. It's such a great way to wrap up this session. I'm not going to say anything else on top of that, because you all have done just a spectacular job, and I do really genuinely appreciate your time. So thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Luke, Colleen, Patrick, and Ruth Ann for just an excellent conversation. I've been privileged to listen to the various conversations that have happened throughout today's session. Thank you to the audience for participating. We had some good engagement in the chat. We're headed to our final panel discussion, and I'm really excited about this conversation. This is where we narrow completely, where my colleague Joshua Johnson, director in JFF's new Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Center that focuses on registered apprenticeship, where he leads a conversation with an employer and an apprentice. We started really broad this morning, hearing the vision, started with our CEO, and now we're narrowing and funneling and hearing a conversation with an employer and an apprentice, facilitated by my colleague Joshua Johnson, Director in JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Joshua.
Today has been absolutely fantastic. Such good information and conversation from everyone involved in this event. Well, I'm truly excited for the next part of this event as well. My name is Joshua Johnson, and I'm a new director with JFF's Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And in my role, I'll be focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in registered apprenticeship. Apprenticeship and DEIA runs deep in my blood, as I am the former state director of Wisconsin Apprenticeship, as well as a journey worker construction craft laborer who completed a registered apprenticeship in 2007. I'm thrilled to have joined JFF, such a great organization, to carry out the center's vision to help nationwide employers in creating inclusive registered apprenticeship programs. Our goals are simple: to expand employer capacity to deliver inclusive registered apprenticeship programs, to engage new training providers in registered apprenticeship and expand existing pre-apprenticeships, to broker and build partnerships across a wide range of stakeholders, and lastly, to drive growth through demand, educate and inform the supply side, grow strong partnerships, and provide high-quality technical assistance, resulting in commitments and action on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We will achieve these goals for the center through partnership with USDOL and our 9 partners in this work. Today, it is truly my pleasure to be joined in a conversation about youth apprenticeship by Serenity Howard, who is a youth apprentice in Wisconsin through the GPS Educational Partners Youth Consortia, and her employer, Michelle Zimmer-Mertz from Menasha Packaging, who has a steady relationship to youth and registered apprenticeship in Wisconsin. Michelle, good afternoon. Tell me about yourself, your organization, and how you got started with apprenticeship.
Yes, first of all, thank you for having us here this afternoon. So I'm an HR business partner with Menasha Packaging, and we started about 5 years ago. We saw we had a talent crisis coming up. We had about 50% pending retirements in our maintenance department alone, and that staggering statistic really expanded to many of our other departments. So it's kind of that beginning tip of that silver tsunami that I know you speak of. A lot of upcoming retirements of skilled positions. So with that, we're also finding a trend with our local graduates from high school that there wasn't as much interest in manufacturing jobs, which was really a bit of a conundrum. So we have a gap here. We have positions that will be available, highly skilled positions, and not necessarily that interested workforce to fill them. So we knew that we needed to do something. We already do a lot of work with tours within the schools, mock interviews, et cetera, but really needed to work to further engage local high schoolers and help them understand opportunities within manufacturing. So it was at that point that we were looking for a partner, because bringing high schoolers into a manufacturing environment can be a little bit daunting. And we sought out GPS Education Partners to help us develop our youth apprenticeship program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Serenity, great to see you again. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you learned about the apprenticeship. And then if you can kind of go into, what attracted you to become a youth apprentice? And then how did you prepare for to get into the youth apprenticeship? Did you have to take any prep classes? What supports did you have that you received throughout the apprenticeship? That was a lot of questions in one question. So as you're going along, I can repeat them as well. But let's first start with tell me a little bit about yourself and how you learned about the apprenticeship.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Serenity Howard. I'm a senior. This is my second year in GPS now. I learned about the program through my guidance counselor. What attracted me to it was just a different way of learning. I was in normal high school for 2 years and I was just falling behind, had no motivation to do anything. And I was always in my guidance counselor's office. And that's when he came up with the solution for me, and that's called GPS. Like I said, I had no motivation. GPS really gave me the strength I needed in my life. And I needed that strength to be successful.
I didn't really prepare for the program. I just know I had to do things differently to see changes in my life, and I couldn't keep doing the same things. Um, I needed a fresh start, and I've received so much love and support from my teachers and fellow coworkers. It is unbelievable. I've never got as much one-on-one with any of my teachers or even coworkers like I have. I was jumping around in a bunch of classrooms every day, never got to have that one-on-one, and this has really changed my life for the better.
That's great. Thank you so much, Serenity. That's really good to hear. Uh, so, Michelle, how does apprenticeship uh, fit into Menasha packaging for today, right? How does it fit in the work that you're trying to get done and definitely engaging, especially when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, how does that all play into your organizational, the, how are you using as a talent solution? You talked about a little bit about that earlier with the Great Tsunami, but how are you using that? What are you doing within Menasha packaging to make it possible?
Absolutely. So I think Serenity is an excellent example of a student that just needs that work-based learning opportunity, right? Work-based learning, truly, it's a non-negotiable piece of the future workforce puzzle. At the end of the day, we know that we need to help connect these students to those opportunities. We know that we need to start training them today. And if they don't have access to those opportunities, they don't know those opportunities exist, we would be missing out on students like Serenity, who we would be happy to have employed here after her graduation in May. When you think about it, manufacturing itself is so tactile, and we're looking for individuals who are tactile, who want to use their hands, that it just makes sense to get them into the work environment, get them engaged where they can learn with their hands to see if that's something they want to do. And it also ties into our training programs. So youth apprenticeships itself, there's such a big part of that is developing our current skills coaches so that they can mentor those students, developing those training programs that really tie to our own full-time employee training programs. So just bringing that up a notch, bringing that up a level, just the quality of our programs themselves and the development that it gives to our employees. And then I'll be honest, taking it one step further. So we currently have registered apprenticeship programs in place. We have our millwright programs, we have our IMT programs, and we have our youth apprenticeship programs. We're already training that future to come into our workforce. So bridging that gap, our goal is to bring those youth apprentices in. We're training them, we're already training them in high school, and then bridge them to a registered apprenticeship when they become employed here. So it's definitely a critical piece of our overall workforce planning puzzle.
That's great. And that's a great point to bring up. As I was sitting here listening to you talk, that was actually what I was going to comment on is Menasha looking at, looking at that, the vision, right? And the commitment to not only to young people, but creating that bridge into registered apprenticeship. As I know, that bridge, that has been, that's existed for a few years now within Wisconsin. That bridge has not been heavily utilized in the sense of what it could be. And that you led into a question I was going to ask you. So thank you very much for talking about that. Your millwrights, your IMT, and as you continue to look to expand your registered apprenticeship programs, you're trying to find a way for those youth apprentices to stay engaged. And as you said, Serenity, definitely, hopefully, to keep her around to go into a registered apprenticeship program. So thank you very much for commenting on that. That was on the back of my mind to speak about. Serenity, can you share me a little bit about your experience as an apprentice? I've heard you talk a little bit about this when we were on a panel a few weeks ago at a manufacturing conference in Wisconsin. And your experience is great, right? As an apprentice, how you got involved. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yes, GPS has improved me as an overall person. It has given me a voice and my communication skills, and it's really helping me with my future. I'm getting manufacturing work experience before I'm even out of high school, and that's not something a lot of kids my age get to experience until they're 18, and then they have to figure it all out. But I'm getting that experience before I'm even out of high school. And I am so thankful for that. Yeah, it just has improved me as a person overall. It has really helped me with just everything in life, honestly.
So is there anything as you think about it, one, I think what you said at the when we were on the panel is the skills that this generation has, those employers can't pass up. Now that's not exactly, you said it much better than I did. So if you remember to say it, but when you're thinking about it, how can employers truly um, what value does your generation bring to their business? What value do you bring to their shop floor when we're talking manufacturing? What value do you bring to their overall morale within the business?
Yes, thank you. I remember what I said actually. I said that my generation has completely different way of thinking. We don't want to do things traditionally. We like going outside the box, thinking outside the box. We have different problem solving skills and critical thinking that is going to be revolutionary for your industry and your company.
Yes, you said that, and that was so impressive, and you are correct. And I think any employers that are on the call or on this event this afternoon, I think Serenity's words ring true and loud about her generation as the experiences that I've seen as well. Michelle, as you think about the Menasha Packaging's vision, how does the youth apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship, how does that vision play into your diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility goals that you all have set?
Absolutely. So we actually have our youth apprenticeship programs are part of our larger Path to Purpose initiative. And so with that Path to Purpose initiative, the goal is to get into our communities and find places where there's maybe not the same access to those training and development opportunities. Maybe there's not the same awareness, and really working to see what we can do to bridge that gap. And so with our youth apprenticeship program, that's exactly what we're doing. Is at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we're getting youth these opportunities, these skills. And if they come and work at Menasha, fantastic. But if not, overall, we're bettering our future workforce. That this is an investment that we are making within our community. So it's much bigger than our organization.
Definitely. Great. That is great to hear. Serenity, what was the most important thing, right? So we've been talking about the things that you've been doing in the apprenticeship, how it's changed your life, but give me that one thing that you got out of all this, the youth apprenticeship, getting engaged, that you feel will truly impact your life or career.
Yeah, so just the skills I've acquired over these 2 years in such a short amount of time is crazy. It's really going to help me with my future. Just having these skills, having an apprentice on my resume, and that I've worked at these companies at this age. Yeah, just the skills I've acquired, it makes me really proud. And yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that has impacted my life out of this.
Awesome. So this question is to both of you, to Michelle and Serenity. There are a lot of people attending today's event. What advice would you give to high school counselors, employers, or government officials about how to expand apprenticeship opportunities for young people that are in high school or out of high school?
Absolutely. So to the employers, I guess my statement would be you can't wait for other employers to train your future workforce, to train your future youth, to help give them those opportunities and that accessibility. And to the counselors, the employees are out there. We are more than happy to provide those opportunities to the students. I know it can be daunting, again, to bring high schoolers into the work environment. It's not easy. Right? There's a lot that you need to be mindful of. You want to make sure you have a quality program in place, but it's absolutely worth it. And I think it's really starting with that commitment and taking the first step, reaching out to your work-based coordinator, reaching out within the community. It's truly a non-negotiable. We need to ensure that we've trained that future generation.
And what about you, Serenity?
Kind of what Michelle said. I know it can be scary to bring high schoolers into your industry. I mean, I would be really scared too. But just taking that leap, you can't just wait for something great to come to you. You have to find it. And my generation would be more than happy to work for people like Michelle and industries. And we just have a lot of great talent, and we are out there. There are more people like me.
Well, I agree with both of your sentiments, and especially in Wisconsin, with such a strong youth apprenticeship program that dates back to 1991, with strong consortia such as GPS Educational Partners, and employers such as Menasha Packaging. The future is definitely bright when we talk about youth apprenticeship and the opportunities that exist for those employers to engage young people and to give them an intentional career pathway to move up within that company. When we think about it and we look back to how things used to be, it was you go to high school and you hope to find a job. What we're really loving and we're really, we really encourage employers, especially employers on the call today, those government officials, the high school counselors, anyone that's joining the call today, go back to your state and look at how you can improve and how you can grow youth apprenticeship within your state to make those intentional career pathways. We have great examples here with Michelle from Menasha. Obviously, you've heard from Serenity, who is a youth apprentice, who has talked about the value that it's brought to her life. And as we think about as an employer, when we want to do good for society and we want to take care of those that are coming up, more importantly, we want to address that gray tsunami that's coming. There's no better way than to tap in to these high school kids, the generation that, as Serenity said, their skills and talents are going to be revolutionary in the workforce. So we're really excited for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Accessibility Center here within JFF. We're going to continue to help expand equitable pathways for young people to get into careers and to make those decisions while in high school so that they can make the responsible decision to enter the workforce directly out of high school. And we know that with a strong employers such as Menasha and many other employers, that is definitely possible. Please feel free to reach out and contact me. Once again, Joshua Johnson. I am at JFF, jjohnson@jff.org, as you can see on the slide. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Serenity, for your time today. Happy National Apprenticeship Week, and I look forward to hearing all of the great things that come about this relationship between Menasha Packaging, Wisconsin Youth Apprenticeship, and GPS Educational Partners. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea, that was awesome, wasn't it? What a day. I'm so excited and energized. How about you?
I'm incredibly energized. I keep thinking back to what Maria said at the beginning about a moment of opportunities. It's been 28 years since Hillary Pennington said those words about youth apprenticeship, but I feel like we've learned a great deal, and we live in a really different world. Young people are smarter, they're savvier, and they're more vocal than ever before. In a lot of ways, I think young people have a great deal to teach employers. There's this mindset shift that Andrea suggested. Like, what do we need now from our young people? If we're really curious about this, then can we, in Tamisha's words, can we force the learn to work ecosystem to be more purposeful and to be more mindful about the needs of young people? I really loved what Serenity just said, that she mentioned that the youth apprenticeship gave her a voice. And, I think what Edison said about young people needing and wanting meaningful experiences, and Jacob mentioning that they want a sense of belonging, they want to know that what they do matters, and they want to bring their authentic self to school and work. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me is this need to continue to be curious about what we as partners can create. If we have a shared North Star, then we don't need to sing as a choir, right? If we're all trying to accomplish similar goals, then we can figure out how best to play to our strengths to create an ecosystem that works for all young people. I think we can continue to be intentional about what we create and how we design our system, and that it's not one size fits all. Like, what is our goal? I really appreciated what Brent said about someone needing to stand up and saying, this is a good idea. And someone needs to be there at the table to say, this is my project to take on. This is my role as an intermediary to take this on. But if young people are at the center of what they do, of what we do and at the table for decision making, everyone doesn't have to do it in the same way. Youth apprenticeship is also a really important way for us to confront those structural inequities that kind of front and center in all of our minds. We can't just engineer one side of that equation, either education or workforce, right? As Brent mentioned earlier, like no one gets off free. So we have to be prepared to make changes across the board, which means we need to change the way we think about degrees as proxies for readiness and create more fluidity in our school and work as means of achieving educational success. So I think that youth apprenticeship is a way to create that. And as one of our attendees mentioned in the chat box, like there is no wrong door. So I'm not sure what it brought up for you, Miriam, but I think those are the kinds of things that are kind of sitting in my head.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that was really clear for me is that we're shifting the paradigm, right? We're shifting the paradigm for employers, for intermediary organizations that are implementing apprenticeship pathways for young people. And you know, the words that kicked off sort of like my really intentional deep listening and connection was when Andres mentioned, you know, for us, diversity is more, and equity and inclusion is more than a buzzword, but when he really helped articulate what that means, right? So diversity is a mix, inclusion is making the mix work. And that's what we're trying to do at the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And when we were curating today's session, we had 3 goals, and this is what I started with this morning. We wanted to generate excitement. I think there's some excitement. I saw it in the chat, and we definitely at JFF feel the excitement and are ready to go and continue to work and with folks in the field, with community-based organizations, workforce boards, school systems. And the second, we wanted to emphasize the importance of partnerships, right? We teed up a couple of conversations with folks from our network, folks from the Youth Apprenticeship Intermediary Network, and also folks from the Apprenticeship Expansion and Modernization Fund Network, where we're all grappling and working together to figure out how to build out apprenticeship ecosystems that work for the young people that we're looking to engage and provide more access, more inclusion to the system. And then finally, we wanted to illustrate how youth apprenticeship can be a vehicle for improving diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think we heard some strategies around how to do that, how to be more empathetic, how to add healing-centered lens to our work, how to incorporate some of the youth development best practices that we know work for young people, but including that in our youth apprenticeship system. So I'm energized and I'm excited, and I'm sure many of you are as well. And feel free to reach out to Andrea or myself if you want to connect to our work, learn more about our network. The door is open, and we're definitely available to share resources and have conversations about how we can help further your work around youth apprenticeships for both in-school and out-of-school youth. So thank you so much for joining today's Youth Apprenticeship session, A Vision for the Future and a Plan for Today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.